Hello, hello. I am Lauren Mylan, the CEO of Digital Undivided, and I'm so excited to be here with you for the 1 year anniversary of Undivided We Rise. I started this virtual summit 1 year ago on my 15th working day here at Digital Undivided to celebrate a variety of things, to celebrate Juneteenth, which we know is again tomorrow, and to also celebrate the ingenuity, the innovation, the opportunity that lies ahead for women of color. Here at Digital Undivided, I have been focused on transforming this organization to be and to continue being the leading go-to resource that is really pushing for the global shift towards inclusive innovation and entrepreneurship for Black and Latinx women. And I'm so proud of all that we have accomplished this year, both having 4 of our Undivided We Rise quarterly summits, launching Undivided Attention, our conversation series during the lunch hour midweek on Wednesdays across social media and Instagram, to bringing in more sponsors and supporters of our work from within the innovation ecosystem and tech world, whether that be Shopify, EY, American Express, bringing in Pine Sol with our incredible year-long partnership, and the Pine Store, our collaboration with Vashti to do the sold-out sneaker with Pine Sol, looking ahead to the fellowship and all of the partners that we've brought on there, Gusto, Amex, Shopify, and so many more. And Rethink Impact, and a variety of venture capitalists and mentors who have come in to support our work and to support our surge in demand to meet the needs of women of color right now in innovation and entrepreneurship, but also the surge in information for us to track and analyze. And we have been deeply analyzing this ecosystem and the founder landscape for years. But our Project Diane research report, I don't think, has ever been more dynamic than it was in 2020. And the research that we've stood up this year to expand that scope into 4 quarterly research reports is dynamic and important at this critical time to make sure that we are all armed with the most relevant, timely, not just resources, but information, intel, data, statistics that are going to help not just solve the problems that we're up against right now, but create the solutions of the future and the solutions that hopefully we can own and hold on to as women of color. Now, launching the fellowship program has been one of my greatest joys as well, but so has our partnership with Cosmopolitan Magazine to launch the new C-suite, to identify women of color, 10 women of color that are going to be judged alongside myself, Venus Williams, Jessica Pels, editor-in-chief at Cosmo, and Julie Wilson, the beauty director at Cosmo Magazine, in addition to some other names that we will be announcing soon. But to be able to highlight women of color and to also highlight our progress, our success, and to continue calling out where we see these barriers to our success. I'm so grateful for all of our partners, Pivotal Ventures and Cerdna, Prudential Foundation, JP Morgan Chase Foundation, and so many who have come in and said, we see this problem, we have seen this problem, but we have excitement and fervor for the solutions, Lauren, that you and the team at Digital Undivided have created, want to create in the future, and we have so much more in store for you. Our programs alone have had 100% net promoter score across nearly 10 cohorts of more than 109 graduates of our programs this year, meaning that we are releasing and equipping more intelligent, prepared, capable, innovative minds of women of color into entrepreneurship and leadership that we know is going to guide not just our community, not just our society, not just our economy, but our homes, our households, and the ways in which we all become inspired and empowered to keep pushing. So I thank you again for joining us for another edition of Undivided We Rise. If you've been with us from the very first Undivided We Rise virtual summit, thank you for sticking with us. After the very first summit, we were named by Inc. magazine as one of the top online resources to help women succeed, especially during the pandemic. We are here as your resource, no matter what we might face. And we faced a lot together in the last year. And there is so much more that we at Digital Undivided, and myself as the one leading the charge of this organization, are so honored and proud to be able to do for you, to be here for you. And we hope that these conversations are as informative, insightful, and helpful to your journey as they are to all of us. Please join us again soon. I look forward to having you at another one of our virtual conversations, summits, or events. Again, I'm Lauren Mylan, CEO of Digital Undivided, and I thank you for helping us catalyze the genius of Black and Latinx women everywhere.
Okay, welcome and thank you all for tuning into this intimate fireside conversation with the CEO and co-founder of Curl Mix, Kim Lewis. Curl Mix is a clean beauty brand for curly hair. So Kim, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Kayla. I'm excited to be here.
Same. I'm honestly super excited about the discussion ahead because, capital is one of the most significant contributors to a company's success, yet access to it has historically been an uphill battle for small companies. However, a wave of startups like Curl Mix are taking matters into their own hands through equity crowdfunding. In fact, as a fun fact, is that the beauty company Curl Mix has raised close to $3.8 million through their own crowdfunding campaign in just 1 month, which is amazing. So before we get into that and where you guys are today and talk a bit more about equity crowdfunding, the power behind it, I want to scale back a little bit and talk a bit about your fundraising journey. So let's peel it back to 2019. In 2019, you and alongside your co-founder and husband appeared on the ABC show Shark Tank and turned down $400,000 deal, which is insane to most minds. But I want to get behind that and say, what was it about this somewhat traditional format or approach to funding and capital that did not align with the direction that you two saw fit for Curl Mix?
Yeah, Kayla, when we went on Shark Tank, before we went on the episode, my husband and I knew we wouldn't give up more than 15% of our company. And Robert Herjavec wanted 20% for 400,000, which basically cut our valuation in half. And we were already lowering it to come on the show. And Robert was basically like, I don't know anything about the hair care industry. I'm just going to be money. And at that time, we needed more than just money. We needed somebody who would kind of like offer connections or know something or be willing to kind of like be there with us. And he wasn't that. And so we ultimately turned it down. And so it's not that I'm opposed to venture. I'm just opposed to just a check. You know what I mean? I want someone who actually cares about the business and wants to be there to help it grow. And so later after the show aired, I got a call from actually through a connection I made with Arlen. I know she's a part of you guys'
Yes.
lineup, but she made a connection for me, and the person she connected me to was connected to Jeff Weiner, the former CEO of LinkedIn. And they basically called me up and said, hey, can we invest $1 million in your company? Now that sounds crazy and insanely lucky, right? But I'm going to back up to when we first started my approach to venture. I did not say, hey, I have a cool idea. I'm going to go out and raise money and then try to raise money and then put it into my business. I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I built my business. I met Arlen. She gave me a $25K check for, my first check ever in my business when we were still a DIY box for curly hair, like Blue Apron, but for hair. We pivoted with her money. We were able to, buy our first set of labels and, buy the machine that helps us scale our flaxseed gel and all those things. We got to $1 million in revenue. And in that time, I was emailing investors monthly, going to all the free pitch competitions, telling them my 3 biggest wins, 3 biggest challenges, and then my goal for next month in revenue, and then trailing 6 months of revenue. And I did that for 12 months. And I probably sent maybe 15 different investors for 12 months before ever pitching a true investor on a one money.
Oh my gosh.
I'd be in the top 3 all the time. Like, oh, she's killing it. Da, 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 da. But my business wasn't sexy enough to kind of raise and venture, because CPG is kind of like, they don't want to touch it. If it's not tech and sexy and cool, they don't want it. But the thing about CPG is that we make money. So, it's like, and most women, because we get less than 1% of venture capital, which, we know that because of the Project Diane, which thank you guys so much for that. Because we don't get funded, we do product businesses first so that we can actually make money to run our business, because we're not getting funded. And so then, no wonder you have women who end up with a bunch of product-based businesses, because we have to make money.
Yeah.
And so anyway, in that process, I was emailing investors. Then when I found out I was going to be on Shark Tank, I actually started pitching investors. And I did that for like a month. And I was like, oh, this is a waste of time. I was like, because my sales went down because I'm focusing on meeting and coffees. And this. And I was like, I was the one sending the emails. I was the one generating cash flow and revenue for our business. So when I'm out fundraising, I'm not making money. So I was like, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to just focus on making money for my business. And then we appeared on Shark Tank, and then I got the call. But I had kind of built some of those relationships. And the only reason Arlen would have made that introduction for me is because I spent 12 months giving her my, keeping in contact, showing her what I was doing, taking that 25,000, turning it into $1 million, and like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so for me, by the time I got to Shark Tank, it wasn't so much I don't want venture. It's I want a partner who's all in and who cares.
Yeah.
And I knew that wasn't the right deal for us. And then I went back out to fundraise after we had made $5 million. So, we made $5 million, we went from $1 million to $5 million. Surely I'll be able to get a decent valuation and raise money. And all the investors would say is, I want to see more. I want to see more. And I'm just like, I see my, counterparts who maybe worked at a big L'Oreal or whatever, worked in beauty for a few years. They're able to raise $10-15 million to kind of get their business off the ground. They haven't made any money yet. You know what I'm saying? And it's in the hair care industry, serving my customers, but investors want to see more from me. Those same people who invested in them, they don't think I'm gonna be a great investment. And I'm like, I've only raised $1 million. Like, and this person's raised 20 or 30 or 100. And it's just, I was like, you know what, forget it. I'm going to focus on getting profitable. And as I was focusing on trying to make more money for my business and lose less money, right? I came across equity crowdfunding.
Yes.
What is this? And basically I learned that you could allow your customers to buy shares in your company. And it's a law, it's called the Jobs Act law. It came into place in 2012. Under the Obama administration, which basically allows everyday people, unaccredited investors, to be able to invest at least $100+ in your business. Whereas before, only if you were rich, and you made several $100,000 annually, could you be considered an angel investor. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to change the game. So April 6th, we launched our equity crowdfunding campaign, and we raised almost $5 million to date.
Wow.
In like 2 months. And I was like, see, if you have customers and you have a business, you should be able to raise money. It shouldn't be based on someone else's biases and how they feel about you,
No, definitely. And I think a lot of times we talk about, a lot of founders that we talk with, we talk about the pathways that they choose to fund their business, and how venture capital isn't the only pathway or access you have to fundraising for your business or funding your business. So I want to talk a little bit more about that equity crowdfunding campaign, because fast forward 3 years later from Shark Tank, and now Curl Mix is on track to make history in the equity crowdfunding space by raising close to $3.8 million in a month, and to date, $5 million, which is just amazing. So I want to talk about, or just hear a little bit more about what influenced you to take the equity crowdfunding approach prior to that April 6th launch. And then also, how was Curl Mix actually able to raise this much money in just a matter of 30 days?
So what led me to crowdfunding? So, Clubhouse was popping at the top of the year.
Yes.
And I have friends who were on there talking about equity crowdfunding. First, I had seen people like Dawn Dixon do it from Popcom. And I invested in her campaign years ago when she first did it. She's one of the first, I think she's the first Black woman to ever do it.
Yeah.
She raised $1 million in equity crowdfunding. And then I had a friend named Max Tushman of Caribou. She's the first Latinx founder to do it as well. So I was like, they're doing it. I'm like, man, I don't know if I could do it. I'm nervous. I'm like, not sure. And I heard Max having this meeting on Clubhouse every Monday for like the first two to 3 months of the year, January through March.
Yeah.
And I'm listening for this hour and I'm learning about crowdfunding. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like maybe we should really consider this. Like, because the law changed for you to be able to raise up to 5 million instead of 1 million. And so now it was something I should heavily consider, because before it wasn't going to really be enough for all the work that goes into equity crowdfunding. And they raised it to 5. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. I would love to have my customers be able to own a piece of the business, especially because, and Black beauty in particular, our customers hate it when we sell. You know what I mean? They feel like they get left out. I understand it, right? It feels like, we did all this to kind of build up this brand, and it's like then you're selling out to somebody who doesn't look like us.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm not as interested in selling, right? Yes, I want people to have a return on their investment, so there has to be a liquidity event. I'd rather IPO.
Got it.
So we own Curl Mix, so we also own brands like 4C Only. And so my dream is that we are more like a Procter & Gamble, where we own brands and overlooked audiences. Doesn't mean it has to be hair. Doesn't mean Black beauty specifically. It's just overlooked audiences, right? So women over 50, an overlooked audience.
Yeah.
Right? Not many products that serve them. And so that was my vision. I was like, you know what? This is a big enough vision where I can crowdfund and take it to the moon. So that's kind of what led me to it. And now the question is how, right? Because when I decided to do it, I wasn't 100% that I could do it, right? I was just like, I'm gonna just go all in and
try it out.
Investors would say to me, if you're equity crowdfunding, it's because you can't raise traditional venture, and they think if you can't raise traditional venture, it's your fault. And that to me is maddening, because the statistics say otherwise, right? The statistics say that it's someone else's biases that determine whether or not I get funded. But anyway.
Exactly. The numbers are out there. That's the crazy part. The numbers and the data they're out there. Exactly. And yet still the finger gets pointed at the founder.
Yep. So it's like, you can't raise traditional venture. My friends and family are like, $5 million is a lot of money. Like, can you really do that? They care about you. They want you to succeed, but they also don't want you to embarrass yourself.
Yes.
And then the last piece of it, other friends are like, oh my gosh, you're opening up your business for scrutiny. Everyone's going to see everything. And it's like, are you ready for that? Because that's it's like going public before you go public, right? Because it's still not being traded on the SEC, or on the stock market. I'm sorry. It's not being traded on the stock market, regulated by the SEC. So it's not just like, you're not public, but it's like going public before you go public. Anyway.
Yeah.
And the how. So my friend Max was like, can you have a crowd? You have a crowd of people, you have over 100,000 customers. If you just get this % of them to actually invest and own a product that they're already buying, she was like, I think you could at least raise a couple million. And I was like, okay. I thought I could definitely raise 3. I wasn't sure about 5. So I basically started drawing up my copy and my messaging. I started, I got PR involved. I had an email cadence I planned out for 6 weeks. We have 500,000 email addresses. So
wow, it's possible. It is possible.
We already had a business before we crowdfunded, so that made it that much easier. Now, I will say, if you're just starting out crowdfunding and you don't have a crowd yet, you might need customers first. If you have customers backing you, it's gonna be a lot easier to crowdfund. But if you don't, it's definitely gonna be a lot harder.
Got it. Wow. Shout out to Max. We were able to talk with her on one of our Undivided Attention episodes last season, and she's amazing, and how she's been able to use crowdfunding to build Caribou is amazing. I'm happy she empowered you to do the same, because look at Girl Mix and look at the changes
women
that are being
empowering
made.
other women.
Yes.
That's what we need, you know.
Definitely.
I would have not done it had she not been on Clubhouse doing it a weekly call for like, I don't know, 12 weeks or something for free. I was not paid for this. So I'm grateful to her.
Definitely. So I want to talk a bit about the impact of crowdfunding. So here at Digital Undivided, we work to catalyze economic growth for Black and Latinx communities to raise the through women entrepreneurs. And though your crowdfunding campaign not only allowed Curl Mix to raise the capital necessary to help the company scale, you're also providing an investment opportunity for the community that you serve. So I would love to know, what does that say about the power of crowdfunding for not just the founder, but the crowd involved in supporting these businesses?
Absolutely. So, you know, this isn't a donation, right? So people are giving me $250 and they're saying, hey, Kim, I want 500 back. I want 1,000 back, right? Because ultimately I'm trying to create wealth for my investors. So that means there has to be some liquidity event, whether an acquisition or an IPO, which I prefer an IPO. And what this means is that for many of the people who invested, this is their first time investing in anything at all. And I was like, that's crazy that our system is set up. And this is why the disparity is so great between people of color and other, right? Because we're not taught about investing. Some people think that they've donated to my campaign. They don't even know that they've invested, you know? And so I think it's huge, and that it's going to shift the narrative around wealth in Black communities and communities of minorities, because I don't just have Black investors, right? We have over 8,500 investors, I think, in our campaign.
Wow.
1,000 people. And
amazing.
If we are successful, they are successful. They're going to get something from, you know, whatever we become in the future. I can't guarantee any results, of course, and I want to make sure I say that because the SEC is watching. I can't guarantee any results from people investing. However, all of my wealth is wrapped up into this too. So I want to do everything that I can to make more money for me and them, right? So me and my customers, me and my community. But I think it's huge. I think it's going to change the conversation, how people understand investing. They're probably going to stop buying Prada bags and take that $500 and, you know, put it into something that's actually going to grow over time. They're probably going to sign up for, you know, an account with the Schwab Bank or with a, maybe not Robinhood, but you know, the other ones. The other trading platforms. They're going to consider one of my customers says stock where you shop. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes. I love that.
Buying from a company, increasing the value of their company. You should own some stock in the company that you are shopping with, you know? And so I think that's going to be the future.
I love that.
AMC and GameStop and all that happening.
No, definitely.
They're getting hip, you know? They're like, oh, I know what's going on now, you know?
Yes, the stock where you shop. It's like in your purchase, you're not only investing in this business, but you're investing in yourself. And I'm eager to see how it drives conversations in particularly communities of color about wealth generation and how, you know, a paycheck isn't the only way that we can earn money, but there are additional ways in how we can build community amongst one another and still fill that generational wealth gap that has been growing increasingly over the years historically.
Absolutely. And you're right. A job isn't the only way to make money. You should definitely have both. Keep your day job.
Yeah, definitely.
Invest. You know, you do both. And angel investing works like your 401k, right? Like you're taking a little bit of money out every paycheck, and you're not going to go dip into your 401k tomorrow, right? I do your 401k 30 years from now, 40 years from now. And that's how you should see angel investing. Invest $250 today, and hopefully, you know, in 30 years, that 250 will have 30x or something, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, and turning to your community for support, Curl Mix was able to raise more capital than any shark could have offered. And so I want to know from your own experience, what are some ways that founders who are watching today can leverage crowdfunding to raise capital for their own businesses?
I think if you have 10,000 customers, I think you should consider crowdfunding. And you haven't raised venture, I would consider crowdfunding. It's going to be game changing. My friend from Lamar Tyler of Traffic Sales and Profit, he likes to say, The gatekeepers are gone.
Ooh.
And that is so true. Crowdfunding eliminates the gatekeepers. It
Yeah.
says, I don't have to wait for someone to consider me valuable. My customers say that's value enough, and they can own a piece of it, and we'll grow our business together, you know?
Yeah, definitely. My customers say that's value enough. I think that's just a powerful statement, and I feel like that should be put on a shirt for sure. For sure. So as we wrap up our conversation, you touched on it a bit earlier about Project Diane, and I want to dig a little bit deeper because, you know, through data reports such as Project Diane, conversations about the disparities faced by women of color founders and entrepreneurs have been amplified by the numbers that reveal its truth, which helps create opportunities historically unseen for these founders. So in what ways has this data helped support your success as a founder?
Oh my gosh. I think in having that information, I'm able to have conversations with investors who are looking at our data like, why can't you raise? Because Black women get less than less than 1% of venture capital. I think I've mentioned that probably in like 10 different promotions or Instagram posts, or it's people. It's one thing to say, oh, we're not funded. They're like, well, you know what the people like to say? They'll say, well, how many women are actually going out for venture capital? How many Black women are actually going out?
Yeah, let's flip it on the women. Let's make it your problem.
I even heard people in my network who are Black say that too, and I was like,
wow.
No, the numbers say that the amount of funding that women got last year decreased, right? Numbers say there's $69 billion in venture capital out there, and we get less than 1%. That means, oh my goodness, 69 billion, you know?
Crazy.
And so having those numbers can speak truth to power. It can tell people that it's not a me problem, it's a systematic problem, and that we all need to do something to fix it, you know? And I think putting things like the Jobs Act in place in 2012 by Barack Obama is what is gonna help fix that. And then eventually, when people know that we have other options, that we don't have to wait on their yes, you know, people will come correct, and they'll say, you know what, I want to invest now. They'll write faster.
Yes.
They won't make you jump through all the hoops that they're not making other people jump through. They won't ask you for projections for the next 10 years. It's like, you know, these projections, they're always wrong.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Everyone knows that. It's like either you believe or you don't, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think history has shown that whenever there seems like there is no way, communities of color continue to create ways of their own, and everybody just follows suit. So I feel like the future is definitely going to be a bit more, not even a bit, a lot more equitable as founders continue to just take matters into their own hands, as opposed to waiting for these big investors to catch up.
Yeah.
And I think
it scares traditional venture too, because they hate the terms. They're like, oh, well, crowdfunding, you're going to get a higher valuation and you're not worth that much. Value is in the eye of the beholder. That's
hello.
I like to say value is awful gazy. That's how I feel. I mean,
oh my God.
You think someone thinks you're a 10x, someone thinks you're a 2x, someone thinks you're a 5x. It doesn't matter. It's all in who's setting the terms, right? And friends, actually, I was talking to Max, and I was like, yeah, you know, I was talking to a fund, and they're like, yeah, we don't like crowdfunding because of the terms. The terms, they suck. You don't get to set the terms. And then my friend Max was like, no, they just like to rob founders. I was like, he has a point.
Keeping it real.
She has a point. I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, she's like, if 8,000 people think that you're worth that, you're worth that. And I was just like, you're right. You're so right. Because if I wasn't worth it, people wouldn't give me that value.
Exactly.
So I think crowdfunding takes away some power from venture capitalists. And it's kind of scary because that's the ground that they walk on. If you can just go to equity crowdfunding and bypass traditional venture, then they don't get the returns that they were hoping for their funds, you know, and then they get less rich.
Yeah.
Everyone else gets rich, you know?
Pretty much it's like they say the shaking the table, it's like you shaking the ground a little bit that they standing on, and they don't like it at all.
They don't like it. They don't like it.
At all. Well, I have one more question for you before we continue with the rest of the program. And I just want to speak a bit about, you know, in the same way that the Curl Mix crowdfunding campaign has created opportunities to pour into your community, you also take the time to mentor other women entrepreneurs. And we've seen that where you've come and spoken to our big founders at Digital Undivided alone. And I'm sure you do more of it outside of your work with Digital Undivided. So just want to learn more about what fuels your passion to support and educate other women on their journeys to success.
I remember being an early founder, maybe making, my first 100K in my business and really feeling like I didn't know what I needed to do next to get further. I felt like I had turned over all the stones. I had asked all the questions. I was paying for consultations. I just didn't know. And when I was in my incubators, those talks where the founders would come and kind of give us the real and let me know, one, it was possible, but two, this is what I'm also experiencing, and three, this is what you should be doing next. It really opened up doors for me. One of my talks, like me coming to talk to your big founders, was basically like one of my talks where I learned that my DIY box, which is my first iteration of Chromix, it was like Blue Apron, but for hair.
Yeah.
I learned in my 9-week, accelerator / incubator that it was a vitamin and not a painkiller. This was fun for people to do, but it was not something they would come back and buy all the time because they were still buying ready-made hair products. And I was like, oh, so even if I could scale this, I shouldn't, because my margins are 30%. This is just fun. It's novelty, not necessity. And like, I have to touch each product 15 times before I could even get it out the door. And I was like, whereas a product I could sell for the same price, I just fill up the product and I send it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, there was a lesson here. And so I go back to, different accelerators, incubators, places like, big for your founders, but Digital Undivided, to just impart that wisdom. Because you're not gonna, sometimes you won't find it in a blog. You know, you need somebody to kind of like, what is your business? How'd you land here? What are your customers saying? And that's the space for those hard truths that really propel you.
Wow. On that same note, I have a bonus question, because you touched on something that was really great about the lessons you learned in the early stages of your business and how you had to pivot. So I want to know, what advice would you share with the Black and Latinx women founders tuning in today who are building their businesses? What are some major lessons or additional lessons that you've learned along the way that you can impart for founders who are walking along that same path?
This is going to sound so simple, and you're going to be like, what does she mean? Launch a Facebook group for your customers. And invite them. You will get the cold hard truth, what they think about what you've built. Sometimes it will be amazing. Sometimes it won't be. Sometimes they'll tell you, this is the best product I've ever found. And other times they'll say, y'all didn't give me my money back and I'm upset. And they will trash you in the Facebook group. But honestly, it was the best thing I ever did starting out, because I got to feedback in real time. I see what my customer looked like, right? Because sometimes we don't know who our avatar is. We have to guess, who is this business for? Who do you serve? I just started. It's like, if you have the Facebook group and they're posting on Facebook about your product or what you're doing, like, you know exactly who's buying it, how they look, what they talk like, what they look like, where they live, and they're giving you real-time feedback about your business. Best thing I could have ever done.
I never, and I'm sure other people watching have never even thought about that. Like, just create the Facebook group. And in that same vein, I want to talk about the importance of building community. So how important was it, or is it, as especially a CPG company, for you to build community, especially with your equity crowdfunding, how that was beneficial towards, or having that community existing already, how that was beneficial towards you guys raising such monumental funds in such a short amount of time?
Oh my gosh. Had we did not have, my Facebook group accounted for the first 300,000 to 400,000 that we raised.
Wow.
Like,
oh my gosh.
My customers, and we have about 12,000 customers in our Facebook group. It's one thing I've had since we were a DIY box.
Yeah.
I always had customer feedback in real time. And without that community, this would not have taken off the way that it had. Maybe we would have raised 2 million, maybe 3. So, because they become rabid fans, and so and I also went live for the last like 3 years, every day in my bathroom. I mean, every day, every Wednesday for the last 3 years, I was going live, showing people how to use our products and educating and giving for free, right? So that helped to kind of build that community in the Facebook group. And so when we launched the crowdfund, they catapulted it because they were the first. I gave them first dibs, so they were like, they took it off. And so that is how we built that community. Me giving for free for years, just doing the things that don't scale, right? Going live every day, going live every Wednesday for an hour, doing my hair in my shower. I'm fully clothed. I'm in the shower and I am doing my hair, showing people how to get this hairstyle. And then meeting them in the Facebook group, talking about, letting them pick products, letting them decide on ingredients, letting them tell me what they want me to make. I realized I was in the business of serving and not creating things I wanted to see in the market, but things that my customers wanted to see in the market. And that is how we were able to even equity crowdfund, because we're community built,
Yeah, I think that's amazing to see how you've been able, one, the intentionality in building community from the start of your business, and how it still transcends today as the company scales. Like the core of it is still community. And oftentimes a lot of people, when they're starting a business, or when they're starting a business, it starts off as an idea and the market research comes later. But the fact that you started that hub of market research on Facebook, of all things, I think that says a lot about you and your husband as co-founders, and the importance of curating products that they enjoy, so that it becomes less of a non-necessity and more of like a painkiller, like you said. So just want to hear a little bit, just for fun, what are some things that you've heard from your customers that has changed the direction of Curl Mix today?
Oh my gosh.
The Curl Mix we see today.
We launched this thing. So we have this thing called Curl Mix Fresh. It's a monthly subscription box where we basically send our customers new products that we're testing, that we made in our lab, and we make about 2,000 kits, and we do 3 products and 1 for like a free gift for subscribers. That we had never in our minds like really considered doing this. What happened in our Facebook group is that customers were like, I would love if I could try the moisturizer in gel, like with a different main oil and a different fragrance. Like, can you guys make that for us? And I was like, I guess we could do that, but this is interesting, I don't know. And then they did a poll in the group. Like, they throw polls up in the group all the time.
Wow.
It's the funniest thing. And this poll had maybe like 400 or 500 responses of like, we want this. And I was like, okay. Well, it's like, I guess we're doing it then. Like, we're going to do what they want. And so we basically built our own little subscription box within our business. Okay. Where it's like new products every month, and we get to test things. And so because we manufacture here on the west side of Chicago, we can do that, right? If we didn't manufacture, this would not be possible. And now this is a new revenue stream for our business that makes $1 million a year. And it purely came from the customers. And so this is what I mean, where it's like, you really got to talk to them, because they are real people. They are not just numbers. They're not just somebody who's clicking order, you know what I mean? Like just a robot. They are people like you and me. And there are probably over 100,000 of them who have an opinion about our business, and we should listen, And
I can only imagine how much money you've saved by producing something that the customers actually want, as opposed to just throwing it up in the air, throwing spaghetti to the wall and hoping it sticks.
Oh my God.
And they actually don't even want that product at all.
Exactly. And that's the most painful, because you go through all the work of developing that thing, and then they hate it. And you're like, oh, now I only make things they tell me they want.
Wow. No, definitely. Okay. Promise. Official last question, because you spoke a bit about this earlier, how you were prior to Shark Tank, you perfected the pitch. And even after, like, you still perfected the pitch. There are founders out there who do need to take that avenue of venture capital and want to know, how do I perfect my pitch? So in your preparation from before, what are some key things that you have used and found beneficial in pitching your business, whether it be for venture capital or just pitching it for pitch competitions? What are some key tips that you can provide to founders?
When we were preparing for Shark Tank, we worked on our pitch. We had maybe 8 different versions of it. Yeah, and then we had to do 3 or 4 videos of us like pitching, right? So by that time you memorized it like crazy. And then we made 50 different flashcards with 50 different questions and 3 points for each answer on the back. And so my husband and I would take
gosh.
turns practicing, asking each other these questions, and then insulting each other in the process, so that if you got insulted on Shark Tank, you'd be ready for it. And we got these 50 questions after binge watching maybe like 5 hours of Shark Tank. We just wrote down every single question. And then we realized some of the sharks asked the exact same questions. And I was like,
there's a theme here.
yes. I was like, oh, there's a theme here. And so by the time we practiced everything, memorized it, like we were ready for the show. But when it comes to pitching pitch competitions, learning how to pitch a good pitch competition teaches you how to write good sales copy. All you're doing, right? And if you really want to get good at pitching your product, I would say go to an expo, and you know how you're like there in front of your booth and you're talking to people about what you do, right?
Yes.
It's like, that's the same thing. You're like, how many sales can I make while I'm here for this 8 hours? It's like, I can't spend 10 minutes talking to each person. Let me nail my pitch down to 60 seconds, 20, 2 minutes or less, and see if I can get someone to buy. That's the same thing. Like, it's basically the exact same thing, but with some investor metrics. That's what you're doing. So expos, not for the purpose of making money, but for the purpose of getting good at your pitch. Because you could make more money doing Facebook ads and stuff and being at home.
Yeah.
Way more work than it's worth, but it teaches you who your customer avatar is and how to pitch them. The second thing I would say is, if you can't get to an expo, go live.
Yeah.
Go live on your cell phone. I know it's a big fear for everybody. Go live and talk to your customers on your cell phone. You will be amazed, and you will get so good at talking about your brand. So that when HSN calls and you fly down to Florida and you're in St. Petersburg and you're on stage practicing, and they have 5 cameras in your face, a person in your ear, and an actual person you're talking to about your products while you're demoing and remembering your pitch. And then they're saying, all right, Kim, look at camera 1, now camera 5, now camera 3, now pick up the product. I love this so much. It smells amazing. Like, that's what people are doing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You're ready by that time. Right? You're ready. And all these pitches and practicing will lead you up into that moment.
Wow, Kim, you are truly amazing. I want to thank you so much for joining us today at Undivided We Rise, and just taking a moment to really dig deep and talk about not just crowdfunding, but provide some useful tips for our founders as we prepare to dominate the world with amazing Black and Latinx women entrepreneurs and businesses. So before we go, is there any last parting words that you would like to say?
Check us out on chromix.com. If you guys want to try our hair products, you'll get 20% off when you take our quiz. And that's it. Or if you're a 4C woman, check out 4COnly.com.
Love it.
Yeah, and that's all I got. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of the program. Bye.
Welcome to another edition of Undivided, We Rise. I am Lauren Milan, the CEO of Digital Undivided, and I am so excited to be in conversation with Arlen Hamilton. Arlen is a force. She is not just a founder, not just an investor, not just an innovator, but she has become a friend and a woman that I have been watching since she started. And so I'm just so excited today to be in conversation with Arlen and to share so much of her updates and her progress and her great success with all of you. But behind all of that is a wonderful story that we're going to definitely dig into. So welcome, Arlen, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
So if you see me looking down, it is because I'm referring to some notes to make sure that I don't get anything wrong, because as a woman who is so accomplished, we have to make sure that we get all of those achievements correct. And so when you see me glancing, it is so that I make sure to fit it all in. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you all to Arlen on paper, and then we're going to get to know Arlen in real life. So Arlen Hamilton is the founder and managing partner of Backstage Capital, a venture capital firm dedicated to minimizing funding disparities in tech by investing in high potential founders who are people of color, women, and/or LGBTQ. She started from scratch in 2015. Backstage has now raised more than $15 million and invested in more than 180, which when you hear the rest of her story, you're going to say, wow, more than 180 startup companies led by underestimated founders. In 2018, they launched a 4-city accelerator program in Los Angeles, Detroit, Philadelphia, and London. Arlen has been featured on the cover of Fast Company as the first Black woman non-celebrity to do so, and is the author of It's About Damn Time, and host of the weekly podcast, Your First Million. Arlen and her mother, Mrs. Arlene Butler Sims, also known as Mrs. Sims, announced their scholarship program, which kicked off with scholarships for Black students at Oxford University and HBCU Dillard University. Arlen, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for making the time. Thank you, most importantly, for all that you've done when everyone thought you couldn't do it. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. That's for sure.
I know.
Appreciate it.
I know. So I want to just kick it off by sharing a bit of your story. I think, so many people know who you are, or they think they know who you are. Let's go there. They think they know who you are. They might have read about you, but I think to know you and to hear you is to feel you in so many ways, and to feel your energy and your dedication, your passion, and your fervor for the work and what drives your dedication to this mission. And I remember, like, when you were coming on the scene, and and there was a lot of naysayers, but that was this time when, like, they were doubting all of us, right? But you just kept pushing, and not only did you keep pushing, but you also shared the raw, candid reality of how hard you were pushing, and where you were sleeping, and the sacrifices you were making, and what you were doing, which underscored your importance and underscored your dedication to the mission. And so I would just love for you to be able to share first person with our audience and with those who, probably know about you, but might be learning about you now. I know that for me, I always say, people often ask me, why are you so transparent, Lauren? And my answer is always, I never want you to think I didn't work to get where I am. And I don't want anyone to think and listen and hear all the wonderful things that we're going to get into in just a minute, that you didn't earn your way and work really hard to get there. So let's just kick off with that. Like, what was what got you into venture? What excited you? And what were the beginning days, weeks, and years of that journey like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I put everything in It's About Damn Time because it was such a just kind of far left field way of getting into venture. And I also make it transparent, not only so that you can see what I went through. I think it's quite maddening and frustrating that I had to be so outspoken and just go from this quote unquote rags to riches story to even be on a blip on the radar. And to me, it just shows and reinforces how much Black women, other women, LGBTQ, et cetera, and Black people in general have to do just to get on the board, you know? And that, so to me, it's the transparency is about showing what so many of us, representing for so many of us have gone through. It's in an extreme way. But yeah, I make no bones about it. Until I was 35, I didn't make more than $20,000 income in any given year, and that was a good year if I was making 20,000. I lived under the poverty line for most of my life, and those formative years of my adulthood were spent hopping from place to place. And in my 20s, it was more of an adventure. I think it was more fun, and it was wherever it takes you. Once I hit my 30s, it started becoming really clear that something had to change. And so around 30, actually, I was working a really cool job, in my opinion. I was working for musicians on tour with them. It was a lifelong dream I had. I was wasn't making a ton of money, because anybody who works in production knows that you don't make, you just, unless you have a gig that's all year, you're kind of making ends meet. But it is an incredible once in a lifetime opportunity. And I started noticing when people were putting together companies, and I started noticing the stickers on Ashton Kutcher's laptop, you know, when he was kind of promoting Airbnb and his other investments, and seeing Troy Carter. And it's like, why is Lady Gaga's Black manager investing in Lyft or Uber or whatever, these stamps.com, whatever these things are? Why do they care? Why does Ellen care about this $50,000 investment when she's a 100 millionaire plus person, right? So I just started following the money before anything else, got really excited about Silicon Valley, and thought of it as a way out, a way up. And my first thought was, I'm going to start a company. I'm going to start a tech company, because I've always been an entrepreneur. Now I know what to call it. Now I know I'm a founder. I know that I have a tribe of people who go out on a limb just like I have, and who have these moonshot ideas, et cetera. And then really fast, I was confronted with the realization that that whole world, Silicon Valley and places that tried to mimic it, were not built for me. It wasn't built for me to succeed. That didn't mean I couldn't succeed. It just meant that the playing field had all these bombs and these explosions and these things that got in your way, and it wasn't meant for me. So I very quickly then pivoted to, if 90% of venture funding or investment funding is going to white men in a country where they make up a third of the population, what if there was a fund that just did the opposite of that, by and large, and it was really unapologetic about it, but it was also really, really like sharky, you know? So that was the original intent of Backstage Capital.
I love it. I love it. And I love that you say, like, you did your research and you followed the money.
Mhm.
And I think that's the thing, honestly, that has always impressed me about you, is that there are so many people that I've watched of all races and demographics and socioeconomic statuses and orientations push into VC, push into Silicon Valley, Sand Hill Road, push into the startup world, and they push in begging for acceptance, right? And begging for the meeting, and just like trying to get the meeting. And they're always trying to get the meeting with the right person, right? Whereas what honestly, sincerely always impressed me about you is that you weren't caught up in that. You were caught up in understanding the ecosystem with the same amount of deep understanding and passion, as opposed to, I've got to get the meeting. And I'm sure you wanted to get the meetings too, don't get me wrong, but I see.
It is, I would say it. I wasn't trying to get the meeting with the right person. I was trying to become the right person.
Say that again.
I wasn't trying to get the meeting with the right person. I was trying to become the right person.
And my have you. That is the perfect segue. That's the perfect segue. My have you. You have become that person for sure. And I want to now dive into all the ways that you've done that so quickly. But I think the theme that all of you will see and hear in our conversation is that it's the Arlen way. It's atypical, but it's effective. And I think that for a long time, especially women of color, have felt afraid to do something atypical because we're always afraid to take that risk. So before I dive into questions, I want to thank you, Arlen, for being a wonderful example of taking those risks early on, because I think that's what we always have to do. Entrepreneurship is a risk. If we don't take that risk, whether it is of our time or talent or our treasure, we are not going to have those hockey stick moments. We're not going to have these unicorn moments. We're not going to have these big rewards, but we have to see more people taking these sorts of unapologetic risks and proving that it can really lead to reward. And so to have done that, without the playbook to do so. And I don't know, actually, I'm going to ask you this. Was it easier, you think, to take that approach because you were so new and you felt like you had nothing to lose, and because of kind of what you had grown accustomed to in terms of how you were living and, just kind of the no guarantees that you were already thinking that life had? Did that play into it?
I think to frame it that way would sort of say that I didn't care whether or not it worked or whether or not I succeeded. I was deeply, deeply emotionally and everything else invested in it, making Backstage a reality, and all of the people who would be positively affected if it could happen. What did help was that I have a high risk tolerance. And so in these rooms where you have millionaires or even billionaires who are mostly white men who have become accustomed to their lifestyle, and their lifestyle is getting what they want, saying what they want, taking, in a lot of cases, kind of middle of the road, whatever they want. In those rooms, I could go toe to toe with them because my risk tolerance was high and nobody could buy me out or buy me off. So nobody could take from me or give to me anything that was worth me changing my ideology in that room. So that was a benefit and a strategic thing. But I did have something to lose because this was a calling for me after a while. And it was, I just knew that I could keep my conscience intact, like I could keep that intact, leave the room, no matter what went down, and know, yeah, I did what was right in that moment.
I'm so happy that you did. So now you have had, again, atypical yet effective, very effective strategy that's continuing to create greater and greater success for you and the Backstage team. And on the 1st of February, the SEC changed their rules around crowdfunding. And you found this opportunity to look to an atypical method of raising capital for a venture capital firm, right? For your VC arm to be able to go the crowdfunding way. What contributed to that decision, and well, let's just start there. What contributed to that decision, and kind of why that way and not another way?
A couple things. One was towards the end of 2020, after almost a year of quarantine, COVID, just knocking our world, everybody's world sideways. We had to figure out something. We had to figure out a way to not necessarily have hundreds of millions of dollars under management, but still operate the way, at the level that we had been operating. And every year we just make it work. We make it work some way. 2020 changed things in that it no longer became working with companies and corporations and Fortune 500s to, work, collaborate, and keep the lights on. Now it was, this is coming out of my pocket. This is different people are transferring money from their bank accounts. It wasn't going to work. And so the way that a management fee works on a fund, for anyone who doesn't know, is you usually get something like 2% of your assets under management per year. And that's what you use to keep the lights on, pay for salaries, et cetera. When we've raised several million, and that's really great. And I know where every single dollar came from, so it was not easy. But by and large, in venture, we do not have a lot under management today. We will, but we don't today. And so we don't have that 2% to pull from every year from a $100 million fund or $60 million fund or 250. So the idea was, how do we keep the lights on at the level that we know we can be? Because when we do well, when we are just on level footing, we really have an impact on the ecosystem and in our portfolio of 180 plus companies. And then the second thing was, I think of things in decades, not quarters, and I think of things, I see ahead a little bit. Just like in 2014, I said I'm going to invest in 100 companies by 2020. We invested in 100 companies by 2018. The same way I saw that when I was homeless when I said that. The same way I saw that, I see clear as day that Backstage Capital is going to do very well financially. And this is just my opinion. I can't give accounting or legal advice, but my opinion is we're going to do very well. And as it stood, only a handful of people were going to do well when we did, because of the way venture capital funds are structured. So I said, in addition to, okay, we do need to kind of keep the lights on, and that's a year-to-year problem, but also for that forward thinking, wouldn't it be cooler than 10 people doing really well? Wouldn't it be kind of cool if thousands of people could share in that upside? We're not going to make thousands of millionaires from this because the math doesn't work, but just sharing in the upside as we share in the upside, percentage wise. And at the same time, found out that the Regulation Crowd Fund from the Jobs Act, that maximum, which was $1.07 million, was going to go from 1.07 million, which is a lot, to 5 million, sometime Q1 of 2021. Those two things, I thought, that's interesting. Now, at the time, you couldn't, and you still can't, you can't raise for the fund itself. You can't raise to invest in other companies from Reg CF, from publicly, can't do it. But I thought, like, I kind of did the beautiful mind thing, and I thought, what if we could figure out, like, create a way that they could invest in our management co? That way they get to, I essentially give what equity I have to, and share it. And so we spent about 3 months with our legal team, with Republic's team, crafting a new way to do this. And I'm not legally able to say that we're the first in the United States to do that, but we're the first in the United I haven't seen anyone else do it before us. Now, people are doing it after us, of course, and I hope they do. It's meant to be a blueprint, like everything.
I love it. And I can say it. I can say that you're the first. And I've been doing this for 17 years now. So I can say on behalf of Digital Undivided, and I can say as both the entrepreneur, the investor, all the different hats that I wear in addition to being CEO here at Digital Undivided and our research, not only have you created a blueprint, but it's something that we want to keep tracking and we want to keep, researching, because as you know, our work, especially around research and Project Diane, is all to really help put the facts and figures behind the calls to action and the systemic change that we know needs to exist in order to cut through these stereotypes and biases that continue to hold people of color and underestimated, underrepresented founders back. So
can I say something there?
Absolutely.
The Project Diane report that came out, and I know you've done yearly, but there was a report that would have come out 2013 to 15, somewhere in there, was one of the main things that helped me understand the problem. As someone coming in new, finding that report was one of the factors in me starting Backstage Capital. Because before it was anecdotal. And there were so many, as you say, you've been doing this for 17 years, or people have been doing this for decades who look like us. But it was anecdotal, so nobody was taking it as seriously. And so when I saw the data, I said, okay, now we're talking, now we can do something.
Yeah, that data has been important. And I think it's unfortunate, as you know, that the anecdotal understanding from those who have the experience doesn't yet hold the same weight as going out to conduct the research, which is exactly why we conduct the research. But just the same way that you hope you're creating a blueprint, I hope that, women like yourself and myself and the others who we know and respect in the ecosystem, that our word becomes a stronger signal than having to wait for the data. And not because the data is not important, the data is incredibly important. But as I'm sure you can probably, you probably feel the same way. There's so much that we want to move on faster, and like we know that the problem exists, but if we have to always wait to compile the data and make the report, we're losing some time, we're losing some ground. And so we try to, I especially try to, both in my personal life and here at Digital Undivided, make sure that we can do both simultaneously, right? Like our words should hold more weight, and then the research should be paid attention to, and they need to actually happen at the same time, because the research is designed to create a conversation, not just to put a stat in front of you and leave it there. The stat is supposed to drive an outcome. And so I think we need both. We need the anecdotal stuff, we need the everyday everything, and we need the data.
They
at
work
the same
together.
time.
They work together. I mean, I had a business meeting recently with a vendor for something non-related, and the gentleman who was talking to me, who we've hired, who is like a third-party vendor, was saying about a mistake that they made. Well, if this happened, or if we did this, we're sorry. And I had to stop him, and I said, you don't have to worry about if. I said it happened, so it happened, right? That's what should be. That's what you're saying, is that our word needs to be bond, as it were. It needs to be. And I think all of these things work together to make that more and more true. 5 years ago, we could be screaming in a void and nobody would pay attention. Today, if we spoke up, things topple on a tweet. And I think that only gets stronger and stronger, and people recognize that, and they have to change ways. And I think that's really powerful.
Super powerful. Super powerful, and really necessary. So thank you for being the first. Thank you for setting the blueprint.
For that one. Yeah.
For that one. And I'm sure there's more to come. But in the first 9 hours, so you have been Republic's most successful crowdfunding campaign. That's correct, right?
No, there's been another, Gumroad raised 5 million, and I there may have been others since, but we were the first ever on their site to raise $1 million
In 9 hours?
in 8 hours. Raised $1 million in 8 and 1.07 max in 9.
9, right? Okay. So I want to ask you. I mean, I'm sure, just like everything else you've done, you put in the work, you expect the positive outcome. Maybe there's no guarantee, but you begin to have a good feeling, right? When you're working with smart people and you feel like you've, done all the right strategic moves and decisions and calculations. But what does that feel like for you? Like, what were you doing? Were you watching the ticker on Republic? Were you just out? What were you like? What was that day?
It's, it's just like everything. I tell people to think about what happens between the Instagram posts, because, even on that February 1st, when we started, it was exciting, but then we had like a technical problem for an hour. And so the whole team was on Zoom. But the whole day was just really special. We have all our team has been through quite a bit. We're family at this point. We've been through so much, and we just know, even when people are talking about us outside or attacking one of us, usually it's me that they're tagging. We know what's going on internally. We know strategy. We know things that have happened that will never be said out loud. And, to have the community come together and kind of legitimize and confirm what we always knew about the opportunity and about who we were investing in, and the value that Backstage brings to those to the ecosystem. It was just a really beautiful moment. It was also just like, I didn't look at it like, oh, I got all this money. It was just like, oh, great. We have stability, whereas we were doing all this work on a shaky boat just the whole time, just kind of keeping it together. And this just gives us the opportunity to have one less thing to worry about in all of this. And so many people, I mean, on a daily basis, I hear at least once, I can't believe Backstage still doesn't have $100 million fund, or I can't believe you all have to worry about salaries in a world where we do this, have this impact, And I agree with them wholeheartedly. I cannot explain it to you, but this felt like we were taking things back into our own hands, matters into our own hands, and we were crafting our own destiny at this point, because we can raise this amount that we raised every year if we choose to, and if the market bears it.
Yeah, that's interesting. because the shaky boat is, to, again, just having watched you, to be able to be the shaky boat, but then still go out there and say, I'm going to keep pushing. And for those of you in our audience, what Arlen is describing, unfortunately, it plays out in all aspects, right? It's something that I often cite actually when I'm talking to funders for our organization. And this is, I mean, you know this, I've never run a nonprofit before. I'm still an entrepreneur, an investor, advisor, and an award-winning marketer. That's who I consider myself to be. And I'm here, obviously, as CEO, but with a lot of deep lived experience. And yes, that professional experience, but being able to acknowledge in this way that the funding difficulties play out across the ecosystem, whether that's a nonprofit saying, hey, we want to solve the problem, whether that's a for-profit like your venture arm or any other venture arm saying we want to invest in these founders. Why do these conversations come with so much continued resistance? That's something that we're going to put some data behind soon, right? But again, anecdotally, I know it, you know it, everybody else that we're friends with and texting with and hanging out with knows it. But why? Why, when you have an incredible portfolio of 180 companies? Why, when we as an organization have incredible other backers, do we have to still sell the opportunity in ways that don't have to be sold for other opportunities that are otherwise very similar to ours, especially when the data shows that we are resilient, persistent, determined, and that our fail rate is lower than, when I say our, I mean Black and Latinx women, women of color, that our fail rate is significantly lower at 27% than the national average, and that we are doing so with far less resources. Like, what more would anybody need to invest in you as a fund manager, to invest in any other entrepreneur that's out there? Why do these conversations persist? Which leads to the question of, how and why the ecosystem requires the work of all of us in unison, as hard pressed as possible, as far as I'm concerned, to be able to see change faster, change sooner. And I know that for you, Backstage is deeply committed to this diversification of who's in the portfolio. But I would love to hear from you a little bit on, like, how do you hope the way that you've had this blueprint around the crowdfunding on the Republic platform, what do you think about, or how do you feel about the blueprint or the signal that you can be creating, or the example to follow around greater diversification in the VC world and amongst founders underrepresented and those of color?
Well, to go back to what you said about, that why are we not getting the same resources and the same kind of, conviction that other people are getting? My thesis around that is, or my hypothesis around that is that the people who hold the purse strings and the LPs and et cetera, who are not funding, they're not afraid that that we will lose. They're not afraid to put their money in because we will lose. I think the ones who are still standing on the sidelines are afraid that we will win. I think they're afraid to fund our success because then we have the opportunity to become more powerful than them. And that had to strike me, along the way. I was not that cynical at first, but I really believe that, because there's no other reason. It doesn't make any sense. If for their upside, for all of it, it makes sense for them to back what we are doing. But I have to think that, and because of that, the idea of the crowd, very many with smaller amounts of money, being able to push forward the same amount of capital in some cases, is really, really groundbreaking and compelling. And it changes the dynamic immensely, because you have thousands of people who want you to win. They don't have as many resources, but together they do. And they're powerful, they're mighty and powerful. And then you have the haves over here who've decided, some of them who have decided that they're just gonna stand against the wall. Maybe they'll put their foot out during the race. Maybe they won't, So I just hope that there's a lot of education around it, because I just like with crypto and NFTs and all those things, I want us to all win, but I don't want us to be guinea pigs. I don't want us to have to take the brunt of that. So I think what can happen is with these new limits, or higher limits, and even not even necessarily trying to raise $5 million maximum, but having the ability to bring the crowd together for even less than that. I just think that Chris Rock says that being wealthy isn't about having a lot of money, it's about having a lot of options. So the fact that we have options, more options now, that do not all stand alone on what this one person or what this one family may think of us, is not just for Backstage, but for individual companies and then individual families themselves.
That's so interesting. You really, this is I'm going to be like calling you because you just made a huge light bulb go off in my head around they're afraid of us being more powerful. They're afraid of us being more successful. And I want to leave that, like, I want to ask our audience to let that sink in, because I spend a lot of time personally trying to flip negative connotations. Just to even if you just have to psych yourself out, right? So every time in my own career that anyone would look at me and go, "You're not going to succeed. No way. I don't believe in your business. And no, that's not going to sell. That's not going to." I never was actually offended by that. I always was like, okay, great. And I wrote about this even in my book, years ago. I said, because all you're doing is telling me all the reasons why you think I'm not going to succeed. So you're actually making it a little bit easier for me just to go back and disprove and write down, okay, well, come up with game plan for this so that you don't do that. Come up with game plan for this. So I would flip it on its head. And it's just so interesting the way that you have just flipped, what will I call it? I will call it the investor appetite, right? That you flipped that in a way that I think is really interesting, and in a way that I also think will help inspire greater resilience amongst founders of color. If instead of going kind of, well, why not me? If we can instead show up a little taller, a little more confident, and go, well, maybe they're just afraid that I'm going to actually do better than them. Because it hits different, right? It hits different, and you come up with a different plan of attack, or a different way to move forward, whether with them or someone else, because of that, because you're coming at it from a different place that allows you to think thoughtfully and strategically without having to spend so much energy getting down on yourself. And I think we all, a lot of folks underestimate how this negative talk can become so toxic to a founder who's brilliant, the most intelligent, brilliant, well-resourced founder can get knocked off of their feet simply because, and it's easy to say, when I was a kid, they'd make fun of me for being too skinny, too this, too that. And I had quite the stage as a child, by the way. I had like braids, braces, and a size 10 foot all at the same time. And I was very skinny. And so it was a tough time. And so people will go, Lauren, how are you so confident as an adult? And my answer is always like, shoot, I survived my childhood. Like, if I survived my childhood, you can't tell me anything now. Like, don't tell me I'm not cute. Don't tell me I'm not worthy. Don't tell me anything, because I lived through that, And so I just think I want to see more of that inspired in our founders, regardless of like if we, you and I, and the other folks that are in the trenches with us can help, create these effective solutions and changes that we want. If nothing else, if we can also take this kind of numbers, right? Like together we're stronger in numbers in a crowd. And imagine if we have crowds of women of color that are now like, oh, okay, you don't want to invest in my company? Like, respectfully so. But how that will even change these meetings, right? Because when we leave those meetings defensive, like, well, why not me? And you're missing out. And then all they do is go, that's exactly why I'm not cutting them a check, right?
That's what they think. They tell themselves, these investors, that's why. So we don't give them more ammunition. You're right. There's repurposing all over this. And there may be even there are a lot of people who are having a self-reflective moment on the investor side and saying, why am I not doing that? And on top of that, I think this is why I started my investor course, that 85% women of color, which it was very surprising to me. And it's because on top of all of what we just talked about, there needs to be a new guard and a new generation of investors who is considered an investor. So these Reg CF investors who invested in Backstage, 7,000 of them or so, they're investors, and they can make those types of investments throughout the year and build a portfolio. And that's exciting. So, you know, in a few years, what we'll look back on and we'll say, can you imagine a time where I thought I was just an entrepreneur and I couldn't be more than one thing at a time? And I ended up being an entrepreneur for my company and also investing in 10 other people's companies that I believed in at $100 each or $1,000 each. And then we all worked for each other. That is like a beautiful future, I think.
I know we're running short on time, but I want to close out with one question,
Sure.
maybe two. So this one too, because this one I definitely want to ask. I'm also super impressed with the fact that you have become not only one who is successful, but one who has also given back their success sooner than I've actually seen most, right? Normally, we see the rest of the folks in the ecosystem wait a long time and enrich themselves even more and more and more before giving back. And I would love for you to share the why and the how between and the because you creating the scholarship opportunity with your mother at both Oxford and Dillard, and what does this mean to you? And I want to sincerely personally understand, but I also really want our audience that's listening to know and understand your why behind giving back earlier than we normally see an investor give back in this space.
Yeah, as we talked about at the top of the conversation, I'm 40 now, and until I was 35, I was living in poverty, and you know that's not a long way away. It sits with me. It's very close. I can remember things. I can feel things viscerally, experiences that were just 6 years ago that were very different than the way I live now, and I don't kind of compartmentalize my life into, okay, I'm going to spend 20 years building, and then I'm going to spend the next 10 years after that I'm going to start doing scholarships, and then 10 years after that I'll retire. I think about it in stacked lanes. So people tell me stay in my lane. I do stay in my lane. It's just stacked, it's tiered. And so when I thought about it, I didn't go to college. I actually was accepted into a couple of colleges, but at the time, I had so much going on at home when it came to finances. Everything else was beautiful, love, humor, but we just moved so much, and we just never had any money. And the last thing I was thinking about was going to school, although I loved learning, and I probably would have been an excellent student there, right? And I thought, I can spend. And one of the things I want to do is make it so that there are some people who should be going to the school of their choice, and they just have all these other worries. And if we can just take care of those other worries so they can have the potential to make something of it, to me, it just is such a 360 moment. And it won't be a lot because it's coming out of pocket. But what I do is about a year and a half ago, I started I have like 7 or 8 income streams, and I did that on purpose, and everybody should figure that out because I talk about that a lot in my class too. But I have 7 or 8 income streams, and for each income stream, I know where it's going. So there are 2 that are for life, like living and family. And then there's one for scholarships. And then there's one for gifts, and there's one for art and investing. I divvy it up. And so I know, and so my scholarship lane is my book lane. So I know when I get a book deal, which I have 2, or if I sell books, or if I do anything in that lane, I know that, what the next few years look like for what I'm able to put forward. So not only do we have those scholarships, but we now are able to add, I'm putting a Black woman pilot, woman through a pilot schooling. So, because I want to see more Black pilots, actually a couple, just in different stages. I'm working with a woman right now who's working on a prosthetic limb company where she wants to see more prosthetic limbs in her skin tone. And so we're building that from the ground up, but that's in the scholarship lane, et cetera, et cetera. want to see something in the world, I can't just say that, in my opinion. I have to try to spark it. And I can't do it all myself. So I love the idea of the example. You know, you set the example, this is how you do it, this is where you go to do it. And then again, it comes back to the crowd. Many of us are mighty.
I love it. You answered my second question, which is like, what's next for you? So I don't know if you want to add on to any of that, but you know, what is next for you? You know, you have my number. You call me anytime I can be helpful. I'm there in the trenches. I'll be at the cocktail party when we're seeing people again and we're celebrating you, and I'll be in the trenches when we got to knock on doors and knock down doors. So I'm there with you. But is there anything that our audience should know that you're up to or look out for, or ways to support you? Certainly follow Arlen on all social platforms. Follow Backstage Capital.
Go to arlen.capital, my name .capital, for the investor course. That's the academy is a big deal to me, and it helps, all of it goes towards Backstage. Arlen's Academy is another website, arlensacademy.com, and arlen.capital. Both of those are going to be interesting to you. Next, I think it's going to be in that column of amplification. So we worked on vision and we worked on execution, and then there's a third column of amplification within Backstage. Amplification, I think, is now, which is you'll start to see media products and experiences that we're going to put out. So you might see a TV show or something at some point. We'll see. We're working on it.
Okay. All right. I think I owe you an Academy video, so I'm gonna have to pull that together sooner.
Nice. Yes, please do.
Arlen, I want to thank you so much. I feel your energy across the screen. I wish we could do this in person. I can't wait till maybe that's reality. We can see each other soon. I thank you for being who you are. I thank you for taking the time to be in conversation with us. I know that this particular conversation is going to be so insanely valuable to women who are either, you know, going to be preparing to come asking for capital from you with their companies, or women who just need to know how to flip the script to maintain their own confidence and their own resilience. This has been incredible. Excuse the siren, but we're done anyway. But thank you. I was trying to hold there for a second, but just thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being a friend. Thank you for being a beacon of light. Always in your corner, and just so thrilled for you. Sincerely, you have been quite the case study, right? And so let's make more of this blueprint. I'm here with you at every step of the way that I can be. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Hi there, my name is Allie Nicely, entrepreneur in residence at Digital Undivided. At Digital Undivided, we leverage data and advocacy to catalyze economic growth for Black and Latinx women entrepreneurs in innovation and technology. Our goal is to create a world in which all women of color own their work. We're a connector and a catalyst supporting Black and Latinx women through best-in-class programming, mentorship, training, resources, and investment. And through our Genius Lab, we bring together the shared experiences of innovative founders like yourself to connect, inspire, and catalyze your own genius. We understand that the journey of entrepreneurship is a unique experience, especially for women of color, which is why we've cultivated a safe space in which Black and Latinx women entrepreneurs can build a solid network to walk this path together, while also receiving the tools and resources necessary to thrive. As a member of the Genius Lab, you'll receive access to exclusive content, events, and conversations you can't find anywhere else. You'll be able to meet and connect with fellow founders who share your interests and our Digital Undivided program alum. The best part about the Genius Lab is that you'll have the opportunity to curate an experience unique to your needs and interests. Under your profile, you'll be able to join private groups based on industry, location, and even Digital Undivided program, engage in monthly Digital Undivided community events of your choice, and connect with founders through community forum topics and direct message. Here at Digital Undivided, we see everyone as their best and highest selves. Together, we will collectively ensure that the Genius Lab is a safe space for all community members. So now that you know a bit more about our community, sign up for your free trial today and see all that we have to offer you as a Digital Undivided Genius Lab member. See you soon. Bye.
Hi guys, and welcome to the Advancing Women of Color in STEM panel. We are super excited to speak with these dynamic women today. But before I introduce you to them, I want to be sure to tell you a little bit about the panel. So as you know, while many women, particularly women of color, have made great contributions to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or in short term, STEM, they are still underrepresented in STEM careers today. So as we look towards the future of innovation and entrepreneurship, STEM continues to be at the forefront of driving evolution forward, leaving us wondering, how can we ensure women of color are represented in these industries? I'm so excited to be joined by our panel of, I like to view them as experts in the space. We have Ms. Serafina Nance, who is an astrophysicist, analog astronaut, and author. Ms. Carolina Oliveira, who is co-founder and CEO of One Skin, and Ms. Brittany Rhodes, founder and general manager of Black Girl Magic. Hi, ladies. How are you?
Hi.
Hello.
Here.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So I want to get started with just a bit of stats. So, although women have made gains, from 8% of STEM workers in 1970 to now 27% of STEM workers in 2019, of this percentage of women of color comprise about 5%. So how do we inspire more women of color to not only pursue STEM careers, but also remain in the field? Anyone can start.
Wait, go ahead, Serafina.
Okay, I'll let you go right after. I keep coming back to the idea of representation when I talk about getting people, specifically women of color, excited and not just excited, but feel like they belong in STEM. So I think, when I grew up, I didn't have any women of color in the field that I felt like I could look up to and that I could see myself in. And so I think that's such an important element to, getting people excited and getting people feel like not only do they belong, but they can see themselves in this field.
Yeah. Brittany, you want to add?
Yeah, and I mean, Serafina raises really good points. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned, which is part of the impetus for why I started my business, is that the kids are not necessarily being shown that how relevant math is to STEM and how a foundation in basic mathematics is a prerequisite to succeed in any STEM major or career. And so sometimes by the time they get to college and maybe they've had a great experience or great exposure to STEM, they get to college and they're pursuing a STEM major. And then we lose them because they did not realize how much math they had to do. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. So I think also getting them excited about math. Obviously, I'm biased, but math is the foundation of STEM. And so if we are really aiming to, especially women of color and children of color, to get them excited, we already know the statistics around math anxiety in girls and in children of color. And if they're growing up, you know, with that math anxiety, which many of them are, they're going to naturally shy away from math heavy and STEM heavy careers and majors. And so I think part of the conversation is making sure that that math anxiety is not able to flourish in their younger years.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you. And it's funny when we are fundraising, we often talk to each other, and one advice that we get is like, don't say that we don't like numbers. I'm not good with numbers. You know, investors don't want to hear that. So, like, I think we women, we needed to show that we are good in math and we are comfortable with numbers and we are comfortable with engineering and, you know, all of those STEM, you know, subjects. And representation is very important, because when we see more people, you know, more women doing that, you see yourself, right? So coming from Latin America, today a lot of, you know, scientists in Brazil, they come to me and, you know, they see what I'm doing today as a potential route for them. So it's very good if we can like spread this out more and have, you know, more examples to get younger, you know, girls to pursue the like similar paths.
Oh, I can definitely agree with each and every one of you. I am kind of like hiding behind the shadows, because I was definitely one of those people that was like, oh my gosh, this is too much math in this curriculum. Let me change my major. It really does start, one, with that representation, and two, with helping alleviate that anxiety that young girls have around math, science, technology, and even engineering, which is like a smooth segue into my next question. So, Brittany, though through founding the Black Girl Magic, you're getting to the root of the problem by providing a solution to the math anxiety that girls on a 3rd and 8th grade to 8th grade math level experience. So what holes have you identified in the education system that could possibly deter young women of color from gaining interest in the STEM fields?
Oh man, there's a lot of holes that need to be filled and that are actively being filled. If I can narrow it down to just maybe 3, the first one would be tracking. So we often track students in the United States in mathematics. So what that means is, based on how they perform on a test or, you know, some diagnostic, they're either tracked into a higher level math class or a lower level math class. And sometimes you try to camouflage, the school or the teacher or whoever may try to camouflage, okay, this is group A or this is group B. Students know, right? They know when they've been tracked, or okay, now I'm in the quote unquote slow class, or oh, I'm not good at math. And so then it becomes this fixed thing, like, okay, now I've been tracked into this lower level math class. I'm on this path, right? So now they've taken me on this path that tells me that my math skills at this point in time are what they're going to be forever. So I'm stuck here and I'm never going to be good at math. So once that mindset is there that math is not for me, math is not something I can do well, it takes a lot of work to undo, and the work has to be intentional. And so there's been conversations, and obviously school districts are different, schools do different things, but just on a general level, the tracking is one issue. And there have been conversations about detracking and what that looks like. So I'm excited to see where that goes. The next one would be teacher bias, and also teachers who are teaching math who have not had the opportunity to unpack their own math anxiety. So one story I like to tell. So my mother is a retired principal, and she was a principal for almost 20 years, loves education, and now she's a consultant for our local school district. And one day, she was in a classroom doing her consulting work, and the kids were working in groups. It was a group of 1st graders, and they were working in groups. And you know, when kids work in groups and learning is happening, sometimes it gets a little loud and you get a little excited. And so the teacher had said, you know, I'm going to need you guys to keep it down. And, you know, kids probably were quiet for a few seconds, and then they got loud again. And then the teacher said, if you guys don't keep it down, we're going to have to do math. This was 1st grade. And all the kids, my mom said there was this collective No,
Oh,
first grade, you guys.
oh, that makes me so sad.
Math as a punishment, right? Math problems as punishment. This is not an isolated incident. We've heard this all the time, even in pop culture. When the pretty girl's struggling in school, typically she's struggling in math or science class. When the student is good at math, they're the ugly duckling, they're the outcast, they're the black sheep. So it's all these different messages our kids are getting. But sometimes, and I love teachers, I was obviously raised by one, but sometimes teacher bias does creep in. And then also teachers not necessarily getting the training they need to teach math effectively to their students. And then the last thing I would say is in some cases, it's the curriculum. So I'm a tutor. Some of my students call me a bonus teacher. And what I've noticed is sometimes when my students come to me and they have math anxiety, it's because they've taken a test or a homework assignment, for example, and they got an answer wrong because they didn't do it. They didn't do the method. They didn't do a certain method. Although the work was correct, they didn't do the method they were supposed to do. And so then the entire answer was wrong.
Yeah.
Just a true self-esteem killer, right? And so that makes math feel very rigid. It makes it feel like, oh, there's only one way to solve a problem. But we all know that that's not true. How can you become an astrophysicist without doing a whole math problems and solving math a whole bunch of different ways? So those are some of the issues and some of the holes I've seen in the education system. And that's really why, part of why I created Black Girl Math to address some of those issues.
Yeah, I think I can attest to seeing a lot of those holes that you've mentioned, even in my own educational experience. So hearing it now as a part of this panel, it's like, wow, like this actually does feed insecurity in math. And I can only imagine how much insecurity it feeds when it comes to science and technology as well. I want to talk a little bit to Sadafina, because you've been very open about the doubts you faced as a young scientist. So how has overcoming these experiences translated into you mentoring young women who may face the same challenges? And why is this type of mentorship important?
Yeah, I just want to say quickly, I loved everything that Brittany just said. As a young student, and now as a scientist, I see all of these exact things that happened in my life as my career sort of unfolded, and it's frustrating looking back and being like, man, I wish it had been different. And so I think that sort of goes into this question of I didn't have people who looked like me to look up to when I was a little kid. And I constantly felt like I was struggling in math, I was struggling in science, and I didn't feel like I was good enough to be a part of the field. And it took a lot of help. It took a lot of mentorship, tutoring, additional sort of ways, avenues to increase my confidence, to make me feel like I could continue to pursue my dreams. And honestly, I think I was very lucky in that. I think a lot of people fall out of the career path that they might like because they feel like they're not good enough. And there's these subliminal social conditioning messages that happen very early on and are continually reinforced as the student progresses and as the child gets older. So I think, when I do any sort of mentoring or when I talk to any young person, I particularly try to talk to women and women of color and say, look, this is hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat how hard this is. And it's hard for a lot of reasons that it shouldn't be hard. There are external factors that make, your path more difficult. And it's important, I think, to acknowledge those and also say, I am here as a resource and I'm here to support, validate, provide community, provide any sort of external support to help you achieve your dreams. And I think that sort of community mentorship is incredibly important to see yourself in other people and then to feel supported and like you belong.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I definitely agree. And I want to explore a little bit more about the technicalities as you progress throughout a STEM career. or pursuing the STEM field, and I'm posing this question to everybody because, you know, we often find that there is an increased value placed on those who possess technical skills, whether it's, you know, you're going out for a job or even as a founder. Like a lot of these prospective investors or prospective employers look for those technical skills. And that's often an area that lacks for women of color. So what are some ways in which founders can develop their technical skills within STEM, based on your own opinion?
Maybe I can start. I mean, I can share from my own experience. In my case, was first like getting those or developing those skills and then becoming a founder. If you are already a founder and then you want to develop those skills in the field of like science, I think it takes time. So it is possible, but it's a little harder to do both at the same time, to start a company and to develop, you know, maybe a thesis or, you know, your PhD at the same time. So, but one way that you can obviously, you know, develop some technical skills faster is, you know, through mentorship and, you know, through communities and, you know, talking to other people that have gone through that pathway. But again, I would suggest to develop those skills first and then to become a founder. Uh, do both would be a little more challenging that, you know, being a founder or developing those skills already.
Yeah, and I will also say just take advantage of the internet and all of the free courses that are available. I know Coursera, is Coursera still around? Coursera has all kinds of free courses. Udemy, I think I'm saying that correctly. Even YouTube, my husband learns a whole lot of stuff on YouTube. I'm like, how did you figure that out? He's like, oh, I just watched a YouTube video. There's so much access, you know, that I didn't have when I was younger, just because the internet wasn't what it is now. There's so much access to learning, and even your local library or your local community college, you know, often they'll have classes. You often hear about people, to Carolina's point, you know, who have said, okay, I took this coding class and then I just got started, and then they obviously there was a lot of work involved, but then they become really successful at whatever it is they did. But they took a seemingly, you know, small class or something at a community college that maybe other people will look down on, but they learned a lot. So all of those avenues are great ways to advance your technical skills.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know if I have that much to add. I think the only thing is potentially one of the things I like to do is reach out to people in my network and look at their resumes and see, what did you do to get to where you are and how can you help me get there? So, you know, whether it's a boot camp or whether it's a particular internship or you know, job opportunity, you know, reaching out to people and just say, look, I have this desire, this interest. Can you help me get there?
Oh yeah, boot camps are really good. All those coding boot camps and those tech boot camps, yeah, that's a good suggestion too.
Love that. Love it. And so a common thread that I see here is not just going out finding the resources, but also, you know, finding that community to support you as well in your endeavors in, you know, gaining and honing those skills. So I'd love to ask if there are any specific communities for women or even women of color that you're part of, or know of that you found helpful for women in STEM. And what should our founders who are watching check out?
This is weird, and I didn't expect this, but Twitter actually has been huge for me. I have found, yeah, I didn't have any women. Maybe I had 3 women in my physics cohort in college, and you know, I felt super alone. And then I got on Twitter, and all of a sudden, I got to meet all of these people who were interested in the same things I was interested, that were all over the world, and that has been this really incredible online community that I think has been really, really wonderful.
Yeah, Twitter is like where all the STEM PhDs hang out. And I did not know that until I started Black Girl Math Chick. And one day I posted something and it went viral. Like, I mean, I didn't expect it to go viral. And it was I was getting all these new followers, and there were astronauts, women astronauts following me, and PhDs in like machine learning. I was like, okay, Twitter, I didn't know. So that was that. I agree, Seraphy. There's an unexpected community for sure. And there are some Instagram also for me in terms of, because I serve both caring adults, which we classify as like parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, etc. And then I also serve schools, districts, and youth serving organizations. And Instagram is really where a lot of the parents hang out and a lot of like caring adults. But I've also found on Instagram a lot of like women in STEM pages that are very active, you know, have tons of followers, very engaged. The ones I can think of off the top of my head are, I think it's She Too STEM, TOO, She Too STEM is one. And then there's STEM Media. So it's STEM and then media, but the M is only one M. And then there's another one, I think it's Women in Science. I think that's the handle. And those are just the three that are coming to the top of my head. But there are so many communities and organizations, and sometimes just people, you know, who just want to advance the stories and elevate the stories of women in STEM. And I found a lot of them on Instagram. So definitely would add Instagram to that as well.
Love it. Love it.
And yeah, I can just share one more. When I came here to San Francisco, I found this Latins in tech. So it's also a community to, support and help female Latins, coming to the Bay Area or the US and, to find job opportunities or to offer some kind of, training and, just like connect to each other. And they also run some events where you can meet up and do network. So it was another great source for me when I came here.
I love it. And if you're watching right now, I hope you're taking notes. And don't worry, there will be a replay for you to rewind and write these organizations down just in case you missed it. And as you're writing it down, make sure you plug in, shameless plug, Digital Undivided as well, because we have a community
of... present company was not included, okay? We got
Very true, but we have a community as well, just in case you're looking for that additional support. You can never have too much community at all. So, want to segue and just ask Catalina a question because, according to our 2020 Project Diane report, having a background in STEM is not the primary pathway for Black and Latinx women to found or fund a company. So, Catalina, as a founder with a background rooted in STEM and a member of our $1 Million Club, I wanted to know how beneficial has your education been in furthering your business?
Yeah, sure. So definitely, having a PhD, it helped us. So we are like 4 female PhDs. So when we share this, is something that help us, to build our credibility. So, coming from outside the US, you need the kind of, to prove why you are here, right? What kind of value you are bringing. So definitely, the title helps, but more than that, I think is the experience and the maturity that you get while developing the research. And in our case, we are, studying the biology of aging. So it's a super groundbreaking, area, and it's not simple to solve. So it's not something that you can do like, overnight. So it does require a few years of dedication, and that masters and PhDs is the time that you can basically build that foundation as a good scientist that later on you can translate to your business. So although today I think the title is becoming less and less important, I think the time for you to develop all of those experience and maturity, both like for your business, but also, scientifically, it's very important when you do start your own business, you know.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So, my last question for all of you. So, to date, STEM is still a male dominated field. So, I wanted to know, just on your opinion, in what ways can this male majority support the success and advancement of women, especially women of color, in the STEM space?
Elevate the voices of women of color, pay, compensate. Yeah, I think there's a lot of financial and otherwise support that is tangible that men can offer to change the landscape of what STEM looks like.
And,
Yeah.
reflect on your own biases, right? We all have them. Reflect, do the internal work to understand that, there may be some things, unconscious bias is a thing, implicit bias is a thing. You don't always necessarily realize you're approaching something or interacting with a woman from a place of bias. So that takes intentional work to address. So that is one suggestion I would have, is just to kind of check your bias when you are ready to react a certain way, or to what's the term, mansplain. When you want to mansplain, just take a moment to check in with self and see if that is the most appropriate response. And if you deem that it's not, because you've done the work, then move forward in a way, as Serafina said, that will elevate and amplify women in STEM.
Yeah, and maybe just adding a little more. I think it starts like doing your homework at your own, whatever house. So, in the company that you are working, how is the leadership representation, right? Are you giving equal opportunities? The people that are, in all levels in the company. So I think reflecting on the situation of your current, company or institution, I think is the first, step to make sure that they are doing something to promote or to improve the representation.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you, ladies, so much. And before we go, it would be remiss of me to not ask, what is next for each of you?
Oh man. So funny enough, as you asked this question about men and how they can support women. So we are working on looking at the feasibility of a boy box, although we do have subscribers now who are boys, or parents who subscribe for little boys. And I also like to say that girls are not the only ones that need to know that girls can excel in STEM. So go ahead and, let your sons learn about these amazing women mathematicians. But we are looking at the feasibility of a boy box. We understand, again, the representation is important. So that's one thing. And then we're also working on, I forget, was it Carolina or Serafina who just came out with a children's book? It was you, wasn't it, Serafina?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm in the middle of like 4 different children's books about math confidence. None of them are done. None of them are done, but working on that, because of course the box serves 3rd to 8th grade. We also have a kindergarten through 2nd grade option that's not a subscription, but I want to get to the kids before they even learn how to talk. And I think the best way to do that is through children.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I think you're sounded okay.
I'm
Back.
sorry. So the children's books, and then also I am getting ready to have a little one in a few months. You can't see, but there's a belly down here.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So just from a business standpoint, thank you, ladies. Just from a business standpoint, just trying to get systems in place and hire some more folks to help us, and just get everything ready so that when baby gets here, we can continue to do what we do. So I'm excited to stay connected to Digital Undivided and to the lovely ladies that I've had the pleasure of meeting today on this panel, and just getting more girls excited about STEM.
Love it. Love it. Serafina and Carolina, what's next?
Sorry, you go. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, just sharing a little bit of our stage. We recently launched our product direct to consumer. So for us, this was like a huge realization of, developing science for, at least 5 years in this company, but, total more than 15 years in our, academic life. So it's really like, when you make all that science to become real and be a product that will impact people's lives. So this is really rewarding. But our next goal is really like to keep growing and developing our science and impact more people, and basically make this company as successful as possible, to be an inspiration to to impact other scientists, and show to other girls they can do this a similar path, but also to improve our lives in general, in terms of health, in terms of how we are living, how we can grow older and age better, free of diseases, and live more like fulfilling lives.
Oh my gosh, you guys are working on some big things.
Yes, we are.
I am coming out with a children's book August 3rd. It's available for pre-order. It's called Little Leonardo's Fascinating World of Astronomy. I am also working on a memoir that's coming out in early 2023. Finishing up my PhD, hopefully in the next year. And I am going on an analog astronaut mission in August to simulate living on Mars.
Wow.
That's so exciting.
I'm very excited.
You say we have some dynamic women on our panel. We are not making an understatement. You guys are truly amazing. And I want to thank you so much for spending this afternoon with us for the Undivided Re-Rise Virtual Summit. Of course, last thing before we go, let us know where we can follow you, how we can stay connected, and then we'll be on our way.
So you can check us out at blackgirlmathgic.com. So MATHGIC.com. All of our socials are on there. We're on Instagram and Facebook at Black Girl Magic. And on Twitter, Black Girl Magic was too long, so we had to use BLK, Girl Magic. So please come find us and say hello.
Yes, you can check our website. You can find a little bit more about our research and what we have been doing. It's oneskin.co, and we're also on Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter. I think Twitter is oneskinpack, but on Instagram it's also oneskin.co. And I also encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter, because we share a lot of interesting content in the area of like skin health and longevity. So we also want to provide a lot of education so we can all live, good and healthy lives.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at starstrickensf, and my website at starathena.com.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us and for sharing your insight and wisdom. Wishing you all the best on your endeavors. And thank you to the audience for tuning in to this wonderful panel. We hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. See you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so
having created that study, putting it out there, forced everyone to have sort of a mirror to look into and the reality of the disparities of venture funding.
I think every day as women of color, we tell our own story in our own way of how the systemic injustice impacts us, how stereotypes hold us back. And this research report is just, it is the plain cold, analytical, black and white truth of what holds women of color back.
Hello, hello. I am Lauren Milan, the CEO of Digital Undivided, and I am so excited to have in conversation today a dear friend, a very longtime friend, one who I consider to be not just an inspiration, but one that I have kind of grown up with in this movement of getting more women into business, more women of color into entrepreneurship, let alone into innovation and beyond. Natalie Cofield is my guest today. I'm so excited to welcome Natalie. She is a force, an absolute force of nature. And I have known Natalie for more than 10 years. If you have come to Undivided We Rise before, you know that I always give this disclaimer that I might have known people a really long time, but we are not that old. Natalie and I have been at this for a long time. And I think it's really, honestly, quite incredible to see how Natalie has ascended from the space where most of us were, that I kind of grew up with, if you will, in this industry, which was identifying a problem that we knew better than anyone else, and then standing up solutions to do that and to really solve for those issues that are ahead of us. And when I met Natalie more than 10 years ago, she was founding at that time an organization called Walker's Legacy. She is the former CEO of that organization, but she was also running the Black Chamber of Commerce in Austin, Texas, when I met her. And so to see her today as the assistant administrator of the Women's Minority Business Programs at the SBA is incredible. Natalie is the first Black woman to hold this title at the SBA as an assistant administrator for their women's focused initiatives and programs. And I know from my own experience that there is no one better to lead the charge than Natalie, both because of her deep dedication to the work, but her deep experience on all sides of these problems and the issues within the ecosystem. So without further ado, please help me welcome Natalie Cofield in this incredible official capacity that brings me so much joy to see her on the screen. Natalie, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for saying yes and being with us in conversation today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lauren, and thank you to all who are a part of the ecosystem to ensure that more women become entrepreneurs and have the capital and connections needed to be successful.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. So I want to just start with like the journey to your now, if we may, just quickly. I think that in the last year and a half, there are so many of us that have made changes, really big changes in our lives and our careers, but changes that are really focused on impact. And the moment that you slow drip this announcement to those of us, including your close friends, right? So you were like lips sealed, couldn't say anything until the ink was dry, in this formal, capacity in this presidential appointment, which is huge. But again, when I saw it, I was like, of course, it's tailor-made for you, even though you maybe had a different path to arriving here. And so for those that are listening in our audience who are also, navigating their journeys and their paths to innovation, entrepreneurship, business, but most importantly, I think so many women of color right now are trying to find not just their professional footing, but also how to have a career that has profound impact. And so, as you know, sincerely, I have so much love for you and just so much joy in seeing you in this role. If we were together, I'd be like, "Ah!" But like, what was the path to getting here? Because I know that, it's a tough spot to get, right? Like this particular role, and you had all of these qualifications, but you did it in my POV a little bit in your own way, right? Because you don't come from the world of government, but you know how to solve these issues really, really well. And I just think that is a lesson in itself, in entrepreneurship and kind of what the skills that we gain as entrepreneurs now translate to today. So I would just love to start with like, what is the story on how Natalie Cofield got to be the assistant administrator at the SBA?
So I love it. I mean, it's true. I mean, it's funny because one of the things that I've always thought of when I wrote my biography was that I like to exist at the intersection of government, of nonprofit, and of entrepreneurship. And when I was very young and I was reading business plans that my mother was writing at 11, I didn't understand what entrepreneurship was at that time. But she was exposing myself and my sisters to it at a very, very early age. And so at 26, I founded my first organization from which actually Walker's Legacy became a pivot out of, which was a consulting company. And as you mentioned, Lauren, founded Walker's Legacy and grew it into a national force to support women entrepreneurs, while simultaneously still working at this intersection of nonprofit, community engagement, community organizing, government, corporate partnerships, and gender parity, right? And also working to ensure that communities of color had an equitable seat at the table. And so this last year has been very pivotal for so many Americans across the country. This last year and a half, actually, with COVID and the impact that it has had on our families, on our communities, on businesses across the nation. But even before we talk about the impact that it has had on women specifically, which has been far more intense and involved. Women were and remain the fastest growing entrepreneurial segment in the country, and women of color specifically, and more particularly, are the fastest growing. Black and brown women are the fastest growing entrepreneurial segment. And so it was interesting to be called into focus groups and forums and to champion the agenda of women of color for members of the Biden administration, to help educate them on the specific and unique challenges that this community has. And I have to tell you, as a Howard alum, to be able to look to the White House and see a vice president, the first female vice president in the history of the United States of America, who literally I look like, and I see myself there. We as women should see ourselves there. And it is inspirational. And so when I received the call to lead this office during a time that is so pivotal as the resurgence and recovery of our national economy, which is exactly where we are right now with COVID, I couldn't have thought of a better administration that I wanted to be a part of than to serve alongside my fellow Howard alum, Vice President Kamala Harris, and under the leadership of President Joe Biden. So it has been an honor to be in this position. And I'll just stop by saying this. The Vice President was recently on the cover of Forbes, and in her essay that she wrote about inclusive economics, otherwise known as Kamalanomics. And again, I can't think of a better, more timely time to lead the Office of Women's Business Ownership under the Small Business Administration than to see our Vice President talking about the critical role that women play in our national economic recovery, and to be a major part of aiding our businesses in fulfilling that promise.
So powerful, but so destined, right? And I won't get too religious on us, but I will get spiritual, like designed for you. Like I get goosebumps, like literally designed for you based upon your experience and the impact that you wanted to have in the world, but also realizing that the problems that are in front of us are not problems that can be solved only by folks who have been, longtime politicos and policymakers, but that a lot of the problems that are in front of us, my POV, has to be solved from folks who have had their back up against the wall and who have actually been in the seats and the positions of those who are, being served, being spoken to, but those who, the future hinges on, right? What the future of our success or the future of our continued issues really rest with this cohort of women that you are in charge of, in many ways protecting, right? And kind of like standing up an infrastructure to be able to allow women's business ownership to even exist in this country, in the face of the ongoing barriers to entry that we all see and face. And it's interesting because, as you know, I ended up in this role, for similar reasons, right? So I look up and I'm like, oh, girl, let me call Natalie. Like, I need to catch up anyway. But it was like, girl, how did we both end up doing something I didn't think either of us were gonna end up doing? You, let alone, at a government agency, me, let alone running a not-for-profit organization, but realizing that this is also both of our chances and opportunities where we have been called to pay it forward, right? And so there are times when you look up and you're like, okay, all right, what are you trying to tell me? Where am I supposed to be right now? This is where we're supposed to be. And more importantly, I'm excited that we can be here, in partnership, if you will, within the ecosystem, and that we can be here at similar times to keep pushing ahead. So with that, I'm curious to just know, especially because our work at Digital Undivided is focused on, yes, entrepreneurship for women and innovation, but with a focus on Black and Latinx women. And, as you've already said, you know uniquely what that is, and also uniquely what Kamala Harris's representation means for women of color in our entire society, let alone the world, let alone women in business. So what are some of the things that you are like most excited about right now in this role, in terms of some solutions or infrastructures that you're able to kind of set up to help equip women with the resources to navigate this time successfully?
Yeah. So first, what I'll do, and I'd love to just kind of explain a little bit more about what my office does at the SBA, and then talk about some of the priorities that we will have under the Biden-Harris administration and the leadership of Administrator Isabella Guzman. So the Office of Women's Business Ownership manages, as of last year, a $70 million budget to fund and support women's business centers and women's business initiatives across the country. This is the only office that singularly focuses on the 12 million women-owned small businesses across this nation, and works in collaboration with the National Women's Business Council, which is a advisory body to the president and to members of Congress on issues, challenges, and opportunities for women entrepreneurs. And so working in tandem with them, as well as with our office and the leadership of women who are leading our centers across the nation, that comprises what we call OBO, otherwise known as the Office of Women's Business Ownership. With that being said, our women's business centers are essentially 135 chapters of empowerment groups, organizations, conveners, access to capital, access to training, access to educational supports, access to networks across the nation. And so part of the priorities that we have are around ensuring that they are adequately funded and adequately supported. And so over the course of the last 3 months since I've been in my appointed role, we released a $2.7 million grant fund called the Resiliency and Recovery Grant Fund to support our women's business centers, because we understand that COVID has also impacted business service providers, such as, organizations like yours, Lauren. Everybody was impacted by COVID. It wasn't just the American small business. It was also those folks who are on the front line supporting American small businesses. And they also need to receive funding and support to continue to move forward as we're all trying to pivot and understand what this new terrain means for our business models and for our organizational structures. So that's a big priority of ours. It's also a priority for us around technology integration. So you mentioned the Ascent platform, which we will be relaunching in a new and innovative way with a number of new stakeholders. Ascent is basically an online platform for women across the nation to be able to have access to tools, resources, podcasts, information, toolkits to aid them in understanding what they need to be successful entrepreneurs and to lead successful enterprises. And it covers everything from disaster recovery on over. This administration is also committed to investing in investment companies that are focused on supporting America's small business. And, the president has a proposal out for his Jobs Act to invest billions into the Small Business Investment Corporation, which sits in the Small Business Administration. And we want to ensure that there are more women, more communities of color that are signing up to become SBIC organizations. We understand that when we have more folks who are diverse, that are leading diverse investment companies, we have the impact of having more diverse companies being funded by these organizations. And so it is in our best interest as a government and for our national economy to ensure that more communities are aware of the SBIC program and are positioned with the information necessary to compete and apply. We also at the SBA just released a $5 million fund to support accelerator programs that are designed. And in fact, one track alone is focused on supporting women entrepreneurs, communities of color. And what you will see from the Biden-Harris administration is a continued theme of supporting underrepresented, underconnected, rural, minority, women, veteran communities across this nation. I was in Tulsa last week, and the president was there making his announcement of $100 billion invested into small disadvantaged businesses. And what does that mean? He increased the federal procurement spend with small businesses to 15%. And so that's huge. That's huge for women businesses, and that's huge for minority businesses, and that's huge for women minority-led businesses, right? And so what does this mean, and how do we become more aware of these opportunities that exist? Is part of what my role is to both build programs, build funding mechanisms to support these communities, but also to make sure that women ecosystem creators, cultivators, and conveners are aware of the resources that exist for those who they're connected to. I want to mention one other program, Lauren, if I could, that I was instrumental in, and that's the Community Navigator program. 2 weeks ago, we announced our $100 million Community Navigator Fund to support underrepresented women, underserved, underconnected communities, and to support specifically organizations that support them. This is one of the largest investments in this particular group of community leaders and communities across the nation that the SBA has ever made in existing resource partners. For example, existing resource partners are like my women's business centers that are under our office. And so this presents an opportunity for new organizations to come to the forefront and say, hey, our communities of business owners have been untapped. They've been underconnected, and we need to have better access to the resources that the SBA has to offer, to the recovery resources. And so we encourage folks to apply for that program and to coalesce their communities through the hub and spoke model. But this program is all designed to support and connect with underrepresented women and minority-led communities, and it is literally in the legislation. And I think that's one of the most powerful things about my excitement for this position is, and you mentioned it before, I don't come from a government background. I come from an executive management background. And in this position, what I continue to realize is that the legislation that comes out of Congress comes over to the executive branch, and programs that are written into legislation and funded through legislation need to be stood up by government offices and agencies. And when you have people in these positions that understand the needs of the ecosystem, it is critical in the design and delivery of how these funding programs actually get out into communities. And that's what I'm also very excited about.
So I think you kind of answered what was my next question, but I'm going to answer anyway, in case you want to add anything into it. But upon inauguration, President Biden signed an executive order outlining equity as a core component of management and policy. And the question was going to be, how does this impact minority women business owners? But I feel like you answered it a little bit or a lot already, but maybe there's something more tied to that you want to add in that we should know?
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely. So I co-chair the Equity Task Force for the Small Business Administration, which is responsible for evaluating all the programs, services, and offerings of the SBA to the American community to understand whether or not we have equality baked into this, and if we can be and should be doing more. And so I'm excited to share this. On the president's first day in office, he signed this equity executive order, which challenged every federal agency to do just that. And so within each of these agencies, both the senior leadership, so in our situation, the administrator, or other agencies, the secretary appoints someone internally to lead the charge around this work to ensure that this is something that is being evaluated and being reviewed for consideration for proposals that will happen as it relates to changes and new initiatives that we can create to support and double down on this. We know that the last administration, equity was not something that was at the forefront of their minds. There were a lot of reversals and refusals around different initiatives that engaged targeted communities that we know have historically not been engaged across this nation. And so I'm, again, enthused by the idea that I came into an administration and I work with a president and a vice president that on his first day, he could have been doing anything. He could have been doing something else, but he decided that he wanted to sign an equity executive order, and that matters. He also stood up the Gender Policy Council. Under the Obama administration, it was previously the White House Council on Women and Girls. This last administration did not have a council of this nature focused on understanding gender parity and doing many of the same things that the Equity Task Force is doing, looking at what gender parity means across agency. What does this mean from the way in which we're engaging women, the way in which we're supporting women? And so I'm also the designee for the Small Business Administration and the liaison for the White House for the Gender Policy Council as well. These are things that are important. They are the top of mind conversations. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that it is very rare that we have official meetings about things, and both of these communities are not at the forefront of inclusion in the way in which things are rolled out, the way in which things are designed, and the way in which things are implemented. And so we want to make sure that rural America, that underrepresented America, that minority America, that women America, that veteran America knows that they are part of the United States of America, and to do that with equity in the way in which the SBA has been rolling its programming out.
Well, I'm so happy that you're there because
yeah,
there
this is serious. This is a
there
serious role, Lauren.
It's a very serious role, but more importantly, there is so much that happens underneath the surface. And there's a lot that we as people, all people, regardless of our color, gender, or ethnicity, assume. We are a people who make assumptions, whether right, wrong, or naive, right? So to even know that this office, which used to be the Office for Women and Girls, was closed under the former administration and now reopened, and you used a wonderful word, reversals, right? So reinstituting some things that had been stood up in the past that a lot of folks listening probably think just continued on, right? Because there isn't always as much fanfare depending on, who's in office with removing or reversing certain decisions. There's a lot that gets done very quietly and swept under the rug that us as a people think that there is an initiative, a policy, an office, a program stood up to support us that may have gone away for 4 years or may be brought back, right? And so I'm just so happy that you are there to not just serve, obviously, as a liaison on the gender policy committee, as you said, but to also serve as a check and balance with the mindset and the experience of someone from executive management, right? Which is like, hey, wait, how this is missing and we need it back. And here's the business case as to why. And then I know folks like you at the table with your executive management experiences are like, we can do this faster, right? We can do this better. We can stand these things up as quickly as we can to get back to work, because I think that is a lot of the ongoing pain and struggle of politics everywhere in the world, which is that, it takes us as long to make a decision on who's going to lead as it does to actually get them in office, get them acclimated and let them get to work, right? So your runway isn't even the full 4 years. So to see that, yes, on his first day in office and in your first 3 months in office, how much you've done, again, is just remarkable, like really, truly remarkable, because every moment matters, right? And especially when you took office, that was a time of great transition, both for our president, our vice president, and all the offices that come underneath that administration. So I know that you've explained a little bit of this expansion, but can you share anything else about, this is the largest expansion ever of the SBA in its 30-year tenure of having its office stood up. What are the other ways in which this expansion is impacting your work, or do you feel as though you're given some additional latitude with this expansion to be able to come up with new programs and new ideas, or how does this expansion really support the transformation that you want to see under your leadership as the assistant administrator?
Yeah, so this expansion is very exciting. I think it pushes forward the conversation around the role that women entrepreneurs play for our national economy. We will continue to expand in communities across the nation through additional forthcoming opportunities and announcements. So please stay tuned and stay connected to the SBA. We want to ensure that we have a very wide array of partners from communities across the nation that we can work with to ensure that communities have access to training, access to resources, and access to networks to support their women entrepreneurs. One of the things that I'm also very proud of with this expansion is that there are 6 HBCUs that are a part of our national expansion. We recently just brought on 20 new centers in January and onboarded them all in March during Women's History Month. And of those, there were 6 that were based out of HBCUs across the country. Again, understanding the important role that women of color play in our local communities and in the national ecosystem and the national economy. I'm looking forward to being able to do more to support a wide array of women entrepreneurs from our Asian and Pacific Islander communities, our Native communities, our Hispanic and Latina communities, and our Black African American communities, as well as our rural communities across the country. I do want to say that 60% of the centers that we just created a new expansion around were a part of rural America as well, and that is also very, very much so at the forefront of everyone's minds. And I'm actually also a part of a rural task force that focuses on getting more resources to rural America. Why does that matter? It matters because everybody's not in New York, everybody's not in LA, everybody's not in Chicago, everybody's not in Miami, and these are wonderful cities, but so are other parts of our national community that need access to resources and also need to be uplifted and supported as well. So those are kind of some of the things that we look at when we're looking at then the continued expansion. We do have some innovative, exciting ideas that I can't share at this moment, but please know that as soon as it's ready to go live to the public, I will make sure that that you all are connected to those opportunities and made aware of them. But the last thing I will just say, Lauren, on this is I mentioned the SBIR group at SBA, and I just want to reiterate this $5 million fund that was recently released to support accelerators across the country that are focused on supporting communities in rural, underrepresented, women, minority communities. And that is something my office has the honor of being able to work across offices, right? So women are infused in everything. Contracting, we have the Office of Contracting and Business Development. We have a 5% set aside goal for women business owners and certified women businesses. That has also been a part of the increase that the president made with his $100 billion commitment to invest in America's small businesses. That is also a space in which my office champions, and we look forward to continuing to do more expansion with the associate administrator there, who is also a woman, Bibi Hildago. So, as we're looking at where things are going from a national perspective, as we look at the recovery, the last thing I'll say here too is I mentioned the vice president's inclusion in Forbes and what she was focused on. And she was talking about the care economy. And the care economy is a one in which women have been very prevalent. We are the greatest forms of entrepreneurs in this space. We are essential workers and we are essential entrepreneurs. And so one of the focal points of my leadership under OVO will be ensuring that women who are going into care innovation, the care innovation economy, have the supports and resources that they need to be successful.
So you said a couple of things I want to pick back. Earlier, we're talking about not just underrepresented founders, but you mentioned the word a couple times, which I really loved, underconnected, right? And as you know, we've just stood up a new program at Digital Undivided with our fellowship program, which is all about that. It's all about giving these resources and this access, but most importantly, this network of mine, which is much of a network that you and I share, plus the piece of our network, which is, all my marketing kind of media folks and tech people, to be able to work very closely with founders that we think are incredibly promising. And so I just love that there is a focus on not just who they are in terms of being underrepresented, because so much as we need to kind of call ourselves out as something, I don't think that any of us want to be reminded about how underrepresented or marginalized we are. So we all need to be empowered at the same time, right? But instead placing this focus on what do we need? Because we all know we're underrepresented, that's clear, right? But what do we need to win? And a lot of it is that connectivity. A lot of it is being better connected. So that whole idea of being kind of underconnected, how does that continue to play? Or is that just kind of maybe a through line in the rest of the work and the solutions that you and the rest of the SBA counterparts are standing up? Is there this increased focus? And I'm asking for a variety of reasons, but also something that I've seen even in the corporate space, the corporate for-profit space, is a lot of these roles that used to be, for diverse founders, for minority business owners, it's all now being retitled as underrepresented, right? But I do think, again, as I've heard you say, that this whole idea of not just who we are, but what we are missing, that tangible piece that we need to succeed, is that we're often underconnected to the right resources, the right people, the right offers, the right intel, the right anything. So anything you want to add there? Because that just fired me up hearing underconnected. Got me so excited.
Sure. I mean, I will say this, right now in this time, I think the SBA's programs are probably on more American tongues than ever before. For example, PPP, right? PPP at this point, whether you received it or not, needed it or not, had a business or not, people heard of PPP just as much as they heard of PPE, right? And so, part of this for the SBA has been about, this is one of the largest funding, this is the largest funding distribution that this agency has ever had in its history, trillions of dollars going to small businesses across the country. It is also the largest budget that this administration has had for the Small Business Administration. It has put the SBA out front. It is as critical as the Department of Health is, right? And so getting our businesses back into a healthy state is just as important as making sure that the American citizen is in a healthy state given the COVID-19 pandemic. With that being said, what happened was that we also started to realize that there were so many places and pockets that had never heard of the Small Business Administration before. And so what does it look like when you rolled out a multi-billion-dollar program like the Payroll Protection Program? And in its first iteration under the last administration, it looks like those who know about the SBA and those who know about PPP and understand the terms and circumstances of PPP have a greater access to be able to apply for it. And that's what happened. And so when the Biden-Harris administration came in, one of the priorities that it had on the second round of PPP funding was ensuring that for the first month, up to a month, that we were essentially saying businesses with 20 or fewer employees are now going to have the opportunity to submit applications to get access to PPP funds before the funding rolled out. It also rolled out with community development financial institutions, which again, we also know are connected to underconnected communities across the country. They are just as important as the large banking institutions are. And in some instances, they may have a deeper local ecosystem connection to community entrepreneurs on the ground, depending upon where they are located. The Biden-Harris administration removed the requirement that you did not owe anything on student loan debt, because we also know that that disproportionately impacted communities of color as well, women, those who come from different socioeconomic backgrounds where you may have had a student loan, and here you are with your business trying to get out of the student loan, and the pandemic came and now you can't get access to resources to support you. So when you see these types of programs being rolled out now, what you see is, we just rolled out a $16 billion funded shuttered venues program for the entertainment industry, because we understand that the entertainment industry was also devastated by COVID-19. And that included venues, live event venues, and it also included talent managers, right? But it required that someone says out loud, talent managers are included in the eligible pool of applicants for $16 billion that are available in grant funds to support helping you get back on your feet. The same thing with the Restaurant Revitalization Grant. The Restaurant Revitalization Grant Fund was funded at $28.6 billion. We rolled that out 3 weeks ago and funded 16,000 businesses across the country. When that program was first rolled out in its first, 20 or so days, it was prioritizing underconnected, underserved, rural, veteran, and women-led businesses who, again, had previously been shut out of access in the first round in the prior administration's PPP release. So,
are any of these still available? Or are these some of these?
Yes, actually.
Okay.
So
which ones are available? Because I know our audience is going to be running for those, especially the shuttered venues one.
Yeah, so absolutely. So shuttered venues still is accepting applications, Restaurant Revitalization Grant Fund. And again, these are grants. These are not forgivable loans. These are grants for small businesses in these specifically hard-hit industries that have been funded in the billions. And they are both still available. The PPP program actually terminated at the end of May, on May 31st, per the legislation. But again, this is why it's important to understand the legislation. If that is something that American small businesses still need access to, then that's where it's important to understand if there's advocacy needed around supporting its inclusion. And that's why I think right now we're at an interesting point in time, Lauren, where, as an entrepreneur, folks would be like, well, the government, what does that have to do with what I'm doing? And now it's like the government, we need their support. The government, that's where the SBA comes into play. The SBA is the only agency focused on America's small businesses. And so everything that you and I have been doing previously and everything that you and I are doing now comes out of this agency. And that's why it's so important right now to ensure that, folks who understand what small businesses have gone through and understand the challenges that small businesses have, even existing, whether we're in recovery or disaster mode or not, right, are empowered to be in leadership roles with this administration.
I love it. And so I know that these, the shuttered venues and the restaurant revitalization are still open. Do we happen to know dates, top of hand, to be able to share with our audience?
So what I would say is that they should go to sba.gov to learn more and to submit their applications.
Perfect. And then I assume that we should all be signing up for updates as well at the sba.gov so that we know about these programs when they are rolling out, so that our communities who are, yes, often underrepresented do not have to be underconnected, and that we can be directly connected to all of the latest and greatest news, policies, programs, grant opportunities. And as Natalie has mentioned, understanding and knowing the difference between what you're applying for, right? Is it a forgivable loan? Is it a grant? And understanding what your options are. There's another thing I want to touch on really quickly, which is that you mentioned this, in the wake of the expansion, that there is an expansion to rural America, which still has, promising businesses and bright minds and incredible opportunities that are hungry for those resources that they now have more access to within their local communities by setting up these other resources and offices. But that there's also been, especially as shown with the Ascent program, an understanding of kind of what new age entrepreneurship might look like in the digital world and how those resources are different. And so it's just a question around, I guess, what do you think the SBA will look like for most entrepreneurs moving forward who are now kind of being introduced to the SBA? Because what I'm hearing and seeing is that both the rural communities who don't have access to these services, so therefore they might not have been as connected to or in the pipeline of opportunities or know-how at the SBA, having kind of this newfound touch point, while there's also, this suite of digital services and toolkits and things online that are speaking to, perhaps the innovator or the tech entrepreneur or the digital nomad entrepreneur, or this different definition of entrepreneurship. And what does that do to your office and the way that you stand up solutions for minority-owned businesses?
Yeah, so two things. One is what's happening now, and the second one is what the president has in his agenda for our national economic recovery. The first thing is, I mentioned the $100 million Community Navigator program, which is a program that is predicated on a hub and spoke model that is focused on ensuring that we have culturally knowledgeable, linguistically connected ecosystem builders and participants for communities across the nation, represented and engaged, and it endeavors to ensure that spaces and places where the SBA is not, or where small businesses were, again, underconnected to resources, that we fund and support the resource providers to aid them in remaining connected and to being connected. So that's something to me about what that now looks like. That program did not exist before. It did not exist before because the SBA was where it was, right? And so now with the new leadership, there is also this envisioning of where can we be, right? Not just where are we, but where can we be and where do we need to be more? And so in understanding that, or in asking that as a fundamental question, we all know you have to put resources behind the solution and the answer to that question. And so this $100 million commitment is a part of putting the resources behind that answer. And it comes out of how we looked at and addressed the inequities that existed and the disparities that existed for the release of the previous administration's disaster recovery opportunities. So that's one. Then the president is also recommending in his America's Jobs Plan And this is all part of the American Recovery Act, which was passed in March by Congress. The American Jobs Plan, which is part of the president's new agenda, is focused on investing billions of dollars into innovation companies and into incubators across this nation. Because again, we understand that as we're supporting America's small businesses, there is innovation that needs to happen even within the ecosystem that we can and should aid in understanding how to best position American small businesses to be essentially COVID proof, right? So what does that mean? What that means is technology enabled. What that means is able to sustain during the possibility of another natural disaster that could occur of any form. One of the things, Lauren, that I will say is that, COVID was a ubiquitous natural disaster, meaning everyone in the United States of America experienced that simultaneously, and honestly around the world experienced it simultaneously. But the SBA has always been, and has always had the Office of Disaster Recovery, which has silently provided support, billions of dollars to support to businesses that may have been hit by a hurricane, may have been hit by a tornado, may have had a natural disaster, right? So we're experiencing as a national economy now what the SBA has had in its portfolio this entire time. And everyone is now more aware because everybody went through this natural disaster together. But in understanding that, the reason why we provide these loans, the reason why we provide these resources and supports is because we understand, one, folks have to get back on their feet, and two, they may have to do that in a new way, given the new circumstances of what that predicament has presented. And we understand that, the president understands that, the vice president understands that, and Administrator Isabella Guzman understands that. And so innovation is a word that you will continue to hear, not only us say, but this administration support financially, both through its proposals before Congress and also through its programming.
Amazing. I'm just so happy that you're the one there. And I'm so happy that you're the wealth of knowledge that I have access to ask all my questions. Because I'm going to be not just your partner here in the ecosystem, but your evangelist of all of the programs and the opportunities that both your office, the Office of OBO, the SBA is standing up and making sure that as women and as women of color, and those whom we serve, Black and Latinx women here at Digital Undivided, that we can help be the messenger of the most timely, relevant information to help these women win in entrepreneurship and as business owners into the future. So, Natalie, thank you so much again for your time. Thank you for saying yes to this conversation. Thank you for standing up and being an incredible woman of color, Black woman, every single day in these offices and these halls that were not necessarily designed for you or Kamala to succeed in, but where I know that you both and all of the teams around you are going to have incredible success. So again, it's such a joy and an honor to see you in this role, and I cannot wait to see how it happens under your leadership in the years to come. Thank you so much for joining us here at Undivided We Rise, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today for another edition of Undivided We Rise. Again, in celebration of the same way we started this series, we are celebrating Juneteenth again. So we see you, we appreciate you. Women of color, we are here for you, and we are pushing for you always. So please share our work, visit us and join us, follow us on social media everywhere at Digital Undivided, on Instagram and Facebook at digitalundiv, on Twitter. Please share our work. If you are inclined to donate, please donate. Share with a friend, a family member, with a corporation. We match with many of them. And if you're wondering if we match with some, please do send a message to talk@digitalundivided.com. But any ways that you can support our work, we would be most grateful. And any ways that we can make it easier for you to support our work, we would love to do so. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you again on another edition of Undivided We Rise.